came the unmistakable sound of heavy movement, like a stampede of large animals crashing through the surrounding woods. "Wait, are those wolves?" Nathaniel asked. "Boss," Andrew murmured under his breath. "Let's keep it moving." Nathaniel's grip on Arya tightened as they hurried their steps. "That sounds way too loud for regular grey wolves," someone muttered in the crowd. "We should leave," another voice urged. "We need to call ADF and G," someone else said, referring to the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. "That's unusually close," Ethan commented to Arya. "I'm sure it's nothing," she responded, still looking around. The speculation continued as Andrew ushered everyone inside their igloos. Arya hurried over to the triplets with Anita and Noria, each of them gathering up a baby in their arms. Nathaniel glanced around, his expression tense. "Where are my sons? Where are Liam and Owen?" His voice held a sharp edge of concern. He then turned to Justin. "Where's Tristan?" he probed with interest. "Jaden went to get him," Justin replied, the worry evident in his tone. Then he added, "Don't stress about the wolves. They're common around here and know to stay in the woods." Boss?" Andrew called again, raising a hand to signal Nathaniel. Ethan and Alex stepped in, exchanging glances. Justin moved closer, sensing there was something going on. "That sound isn't actually real," Andrew began. "What?" Nathaniel asked, frowning. When Andrew grinned mischievously, realization dawned on Nathaniel. He groaned. "Please don't tell me that was Liam. Oh my God, the meeting, of course," he muttered, shaking his head before a chuckle escaped him. Andrew told them about Liam's prank. "Why weren't we let in on this?" Ethan asked, crossing his arms. "Damn it, I want in," he added, making Nathaniel and Alex burst into laughter. Justin, however, frowned, feeling conflicted about the prank. Tristan wasn't fully recovered and definitely wasn't strong enough for anything too strenuous. "Jake and Aiden are supervising," Andrew assured him. Justin sighed, then smirked. He had a good idea of who the prank was targeting, or rather, which group was about to suffer. "Can we make sure nobody shoots at my kids, please?" Nathaniel said dryly. "What?" Arya, catching that last part, gasped in horror. "Shit," Nathaniel cursed as everyone turned toward her. Outside, Ash, now disguised in a realistic werewolf suit covered in coarse brown fur, burst from the tree line, making sure to emerge right where the children had gathered. With a guttural roar, he lunged forward. The children shrieked in terror. Jackson stood frozen, his face draining of color, while his 5 friends bolted in opposite directions. The rest of the kids scattered, screaming as they ran. Ash seized Jackson, lifting him effortlessly. The boy let out an ear-piercing wail. Then, suddenly, a pungent, unmistakable scent hit Ash's nose. Oh, hell no. Jackson had lost control of his bowels. The acrid smell mingled with the crisp night air just before Jackson's eyes rolled back, and he passed out. Ash bit back a laugh. "I am going straight to hell for this." He then grabbed another boy who was screaming his lungs out, frantically calling for his mother. Rolling his eyes, Ash retreated into the woods, just as more werewolves, each in detailed costumes with glowing eyes and hulking frames, charged from the trees, causing pure chaos. Children cried out, desperately calling for their parents. Some adults instinctively rushed forward to help, only to freeze in horror when the resort's floodlights suddenly illuminated one of the werewolves. This one stood taller than the others, its menacing form highlighted against the snow, glowing purplish eyes piercing the darkness. "It's a werewolf!" someone shrieked. A fresh wave of screams erupted. From atop a jeep hidden in the woods, the orchestrators, Liam, Owen, and Tristan, watched through binoculars, their shoulders shaking with laughter. "Did you see Jackson's face?" Liam gasped between wheezes. "Did you, Owen?" Owen, despite himself, doubled over laughing. Tristan was already struggling to breathe from hysterics. Jake and Aiden, stationed nearby, smirked as they kept a watchful eye on both the pranksters and the unsuspecting victims. They were ready to intervene if anything got out of hand. Meanwhile, Ash raced through the woods carrying the unconscious Jackson. He reached a sturdy tree with thick branches and unceremoniously draped the boy over a wide crotch, letting him dangle limply. He did the same with the second boy, but this one still wouldn't stop screaming. Annoyed, Ash let out a guttural snarl right in the kid's face. The boy went rigid and promptly passed out. The werewolves continued their rampage, rounding up every kid on Liam's personal list of tormentors. Each child found themselves hoisted into tree nooks, left suspended just out of reach. Then, the pack turned their attention to the parents. The costumed figures dashed toward the panicked adults who shrieked and stumbled over each other in a frenzied attempt to flee. The scene devolved into pure, unfiltered chaos, and then Ash saw her, Pamela. He locked onto her and charged. Pamela let out an ear-splitting scream as she scrambled backward, her wide eyes filled with terror. Her parents, without a second thought, abandoned her, sprinting in the opposite direction. Ash had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing outright. Leaning casually against a tree, Jaden observed the spectacle with amusement. "Damn," she muttered under her breath, arms crossed. "I need a whole ass bag of popcorn for this." She chuckled to herself, shaking her head as the night continued to descend into chaos. Back in the igloo, Nathaniel quickly considered how to respond to Arya without exposing what the children were actually up to. He decided it was best to handle them himself. No need to give their poor mother a heart attack. "They're doing some target practice in the woods," he said smoothly. Jake and Jaden had gone to get them. Arya, unconvinced, turned toward the glass wall. The distant howls and rising screams outside made her frown. "Can we please find out what's really going on?" she said, her voice edged with concern. "It's getting wild out there." "We'll be leaving soon, Dr. Hawthorne," Andrew reassured her. "I'm just waiting for the all clear from the team. Don't worry, the boys are with Jake, Aiden, Ash, and Jaden." Arya exhaled, nodding. She trusted Andrew, but something about the chaos outside still unsettled her. 15 minutes later, Andrew's comm crackled to life. "That was brilliantly done. Over and out." Liam's voice came through smug and triumphant. Andrew grinned, shaking his head as he tried to suppress a laugh. Nathaniel caught the reaction immediately. "What happened?" he whispered. Andrew simply replied, "Liam." Nathaniel felt his chest tighten. He was both proud and absolutely terrified that his 7-year-old son had already managed to convince his veteran bodyguards to participate in a large-scale prank on unsuspecting people. "We can move now," Andrew announced, pushing open the door. Ethan stepped out first, guiding Isla into the open. He glanced around at the chaos and whispered under his breath, "This is epic." The scene before them was pure disorder. Parents scrambled, frantically clutching their children, some still crying hysterically. Others were scanning the area, their panic mounting when they realized that 6 boys were still missing. A lone, piercing wail echoed from the woods, instantly drawing the attention of the crowd. Meanwhile, Jake, Aiden, and Ash had already loaded Liam, Owen, and Tristan into the jeep and sped away from the scene, heading toward the parking lot where the other vehicles were stationed. The men in costumes had changed back impressively fast, shoving their gear into the jeep before slipping back into the woods unnoticed. Liam, Owen, and Tristan followed Ash, Jake, and Aiden to where the bullies had been strung up in the trees. Jackson had regained consciousness and was being helped down by one of the parents. Aiden, Jake, and Ash moved toward the remaining trees, cutting the other boys free. Liam let out a cackle when he saw the dark stain running down Jackson's pants. "You pissed yourself," he taunted. Jackson's face turned red with rage, and the moment his feet touched the ground, he let out a furious growl. "You!" he roared, pointing an accusing finger in Liam's direction before charging straight at him. Owen reacted instantly, yanking Liam out of the way just as Jackson lunged, causing him to barrel straight past them and stumble forward. Jackson gritted his teeth, turning back toward them, his fists clenched. "Hey! Cut it out!" Jake's voice bellowed from across the field, but Jackson wasn't listening. He charged again. "Owen!" Tristan called in warning. Owen stood his ground, stepping protectively in front of Liam. The moment Jackson swung at him, Owen ducked, just as his Uncle Andrew had taught him. Since he was too short to reach Jackson's face, Owen went for the next best option. He stomped hard on the older boy's foot. Jackson howled, staggering back, but it only fueled his rage. He reared up, preparing to hit Owen. Liam joined in to give Owen back up, but Owen was way faster. He didn't hesitate. The second Jackson left an opening, Owen struck, his small fist landing squarely in Jackson's groin. A strangled, high-pitched cry tore from Jackson's throat as he crumpled to his knees. Liam burst out laughing and whipped out his phone. "Jackson, say cheese!" He grinned, snapping a photo of the bully writhing in pain. Tristan doubled over, laughing uncontrollably. Owen, however, didn't share in their amusement. His heart was still hammering in his chest. Jackson had really tried to hurt Liam. Even though he had taken the boy down, the fear still gripped him. Jake reached them first, scooping Owen and Liam into his arms. Aiden lifted Tristan and supposedly accidentally stepped on Jackson's foot. The boy cried out. "Oh, my bad," Aiden replied, faking. "Best day ever." Liam giggled, still holding onto his phone. Owen, however, buried his face against Jake's shoulder, wrapping his arms tightly around his neck. Jake immediately felt the tremble in the boy's small body. His grip tightened around him in response. "I got you, champ," he whispered. Owen nodded against his shoulder, exhaling shakily as Jake held him close. When Jake arrived at the parking lot carrying Owen and Liam, Nathaniel didn't wait by the car. He strode forward to meet them halfway. As he approached, his eyes locked with Jake's, who gave a subtle gesture toward Owen. Nathaniel's brows furrowed. Without hesitation, he gently took Owen from Jake's arms, pulling him close. Owen wrapped his arms around his father's neck, his voice small and barely audible. "I had to hit him, Dad. He was trying to hurt Liam," he admitted, his tone laced with uncertainty, as if bracing for his father's reaction. Nathaniel held him tighter. "You did well protecting your brother, son. There's nothing wrong with self-defense." Owen exhaled and nodded against his father's shoulder. Ethan and Alex fist-bumped with Liam, the little imp grinning unabashedly before turning to fist-bump his Uncle Ash. With that, they all piled into the car. Arya shot Liam a suspicious look, but he simply flashed her an innocent smile. "Love you, Mum," he said sweetly. Ethan let out a strangled sound before exclaiming, "I would love for you to give Isla everything you ingested while pregnant with the twins, Ariana." Isla's face burned with embarrassment as laughter erupted around them. As the Jeep rumbled toward the airport, Jake heard Liam let out a contented sigh. Soon enough, the boy had dozed off, a small, satisfied smile still on his face. Jake shook his head, chuckling. Back at the carnival grounds, Grace stepped back as Rowan moved to join the group heading to the airport. Cassandra, Juliet, and Miss White, who were set to be driven back to the ranch and the hospital, made their way toward a waiting vehicle. Nearby, Adam and Lewis lingered, ensuring the women departed safely before heading to the airport themselves. Rowan reached the car's open door but hesitated. He couldn't bring himself to leave. Not today, not after what had happened between him and Grace. For the first time, he had broken free from his infatuation with Ariana and allowed himself to be with someone else. The thought of leaving now unsettled him. What if he lost that connection? What if, by stepping onto that plane, he doomed himself to a lifetime of solitude? His chest rose and fell as he turned abruptly, locking eyes with Grace. She met his gaze with a hesitant smile, but he caught the slight tremble in her lower lip. Adam observed silently as Rowan took a few tentative steps back toward Grace. Extending his hand, he spoke, his voice low and heavy with emotion. "Say the word and I'll stay. At least a little longer if you want. I don't have to leave right now." Grace glanced toward Cassandra and Juliet, who both gave her a nod of encouragement. Turning back to Rowan, she nodded in response. Rowan exhaled sharply, a smile breaking across his face. Adam grinned when Juliet cast a glance his way. Cassandra glanced at Lewis, who chuckled. "If Rowan is staying, can Cassie and Juliet come with us?" Lewis whispered to Adam, leaning in slightly while keeping his eyes on Cassandra. "I promise you, it's not easy from over here," he added, feeling the constriction in his chest every time he looked at Cassandra, the memory of her crying in his arms at the cottage still vivid in his mind. "We need to inform the boss about Rowan and check if Rowan is willing to cover for them at the hospital," Adam replied. "All right, let's ask, because right now Rowan's making us look bad," Lewis said. Adam burst into laughter. Juliet exchanged a glance with Cassandra, both wondering what the two found amusing. "Rowan, do you mind if I inform Andrew and the boss?" Adam called out. "Not at all. I need to tell Arya as well, Rowan admitted, ignoring the slight tug of reluctance in his heart at the thought of telling Arya he wanted to stay back to be with Grace. Nope. Hold on a second, Lewis interjected. Let Adam finish his call first. Rowan nodded. They're up to something, Juliet murmured to Cassandra. Whenever Adam has that look, he's usually up to something, Juliet added, suspicion evident in her voice. Cassandra giggled quietly. Adam stepped away from the vehicle, moving to a quieter spot before dialing Andrew. Andrew, who was behind the wheel of the car transporting the Hawthornes to the airport, answered on the first ring. Activating his comm unit to listen through his earpiece, he then handed his phone to Jake, who was in the passenger seat, still holding Liam. Andrew reasoned that if there was an issue, he wouldn't be able to speak openly without risking sensitive information being overheard, but Jake could reply via text if necessary. McLeod, Andrew answered. We, have a situation, boss, Adam began, then proceeded to explain Rowan's decision. Jake, listening in, quickly sent a text response. Isn't he part of the medical team handling Ian, Sheriff Logan, and Tristan? We also have Sam Cavalier back in New York. On the other end, when Andrew didn't respond verbally, but a message notification chimed, Adam put the phone on speaker and opened the message. After reading it, he replied aloud. Actually, Juliet was in charge of Ian. Rowan, Williams, Sterling, Yen, Anita, and Dr. Hawthorne were overseeing Sheriff Logan's care, while Dr. Hart and Dr. Hawthorne are handling Tristan, he clarified. Jake typed a response while Andrew listened in on the conversation. All right then, how many days does he plan to stay? Andrew asked, avoiding mentioning a name. He didn't specify, but maybe a week, Adam offered. Okay, then he needs to inform Dr. Hawthorne and we'll have his stuff sent back to the ranch, Jake typed and sent. Adam read the message and replied, Roger that. But boss, Lewis and I were wondering, if Rowan is staying, can Cassie and Juliet come? Andrew chuckled and responded verbally. Last I checked, you two are grown men. Jake smirked as he typed, You two clowns know we have room. If you want them to come with us, just bring them along. But they need to speak directly to Dr. Hawthorne. No objections on our end. He hit send, and both he and Andrew chuckled. What's so funny? Ethan asked from the back. Why are you so nosy? Alex interjected. Yeah, like you're not curious too, Ethan shot back, making everyone in the car laugh. Just then, Arya's phone pinged with a notification. Andrew looked at her via the rearview mirror and said, I'll answer that after Dr. Hawthorne finishes checking her messages. Ah, you're no fun, Ethan muttered dismissively. Nathaniel chuckled, casting a sidelong glance at Arya. She was seated next to him holding Esme, while Owen remained perched on Nathaniel's lap, communicating with Tristan on his phone. Anita cradled Landon, and Anna kept a secure hold on Mason. Feeling Nathaniel's gaze on her, Arya turned to meet his eyes. She gave him a warm smile, but he continued to study her with a searching gaze until a series of message pings from her phone drew her attention away. Frowning slightly, she unlocked her phone and saw the messages were from Rowan. He was requesting a week off to stay in Sylvan Ridge for personal reasons. Growing impatient, Ethan leaned forward from the back seat, peering over Arya's shoulder to read the messages. Ooh, he cooed. Isla laughed and swatted him playfully on the back, earning a grin from Ethan. Arya shot him an irritated glance while Nathaniel chuckled. Anita stretched her neck to get a look at the screen, and Anna, still holding Mason securely, also leaned up to read the messages. Arya, realizing that only Isla, Ava, and Noria seemed to be behaving themselves, shook with laughter. What is this thirst for drama, my God? She said. Oh, looks like Rowan wants to stay back for Grace, Anita whispered to Arya, but everyone heard her. Arya broke into laughter. Anita grinned, completely unrepentant. You are a class act, Arya remarked. You love me, Anita replied smugly. Please grant him the leave. He's so in love, Anna chimed in. Finally, I can get that prick off my back, Nathaniel muttered. Arya heard him and burst into laughter, then smacked his forearm. He turned to her, feigning innocence as if he had no idea why she'd done it. Silly goose, she scolded, but her voice carried unmistakable fondness. Nathaniel winked at her unabashedly. Are you going to grant the poor guy leave, or are you a heartless slave driver? He teased with a dramatic flair. Arya laughed again and playfully smacked his arm once more. Nathaniel forced himself to maintain a straight face. "Well, I would respond if you'd let me," she quipped, before turning her attention back to her phone. She then promptly composed a reply to Rowan. "You can take the necessary leave. After all, I did interrupt your annual break with the arrival of the triplets." Then she added, "If there's anything you need, please let me know so we can sort it out before we leave." Satisfied, she hit send. On the other end, Adam waited as Rowan communicated with Dr. Hawthorne. When it became apparent that Rowan might actually get the time off he wanted, Adam took the opportunity to pull Juliet and Cassandra aside. He gestured for Lewis to join them, then met Juliet's gaze and held it. "What do you ladies think about coming to New York with us for a few days?" he asked. "Don't for a second worry about expenses. I will take care of it," he quickly added. Juliet exchanged a knowing smile with Cassandra. Cassandra nodded, glancing at Lewis, who was watching her with a dark, intense gaze. Back in the car, Arya received another message, first from Cassandra, then from Juliet. She let out a loud groan. When Anita and Anna saw the message, they burst into laughter. Juliet and Cassandra were requesting a week of leave, planning to cover for Rowan in New York if needed. Nathaniel glanced at the screen and chuckled. "That'll teach you to stop hiring attractive female doctors," he said in a low, deep voice. Arya arched an eyebrow at him, feigning offense. "So it's my fault that your men are stealing my girls?" From the front seat, Andrew cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. "So, Blackwood, are you ready to hear the answer to your earlier question?" he asked. Jake started laughing, and Nathaniel, Alex, and Ethan quickly followed, knowing full well that Andrew had intervened to stop Arya from going down that particular rabbit hole. Carefully adjusting Esme against her chest, Arya shifted slightly in her seat to reach Andrew in the driver's seat, then smacked him on the shoulder. Laughter erupted in the car. Back at the carnival grounds, Adam, Lewis, Stephen, and Seth ensured that everyone remaining from their group was loaded into the last 3 jeeps before they started to get in themselves. "Hey, you there, wait!" Seth immediately recognized the unmistakable voice of Pamela Anderson and muttered to the others, "Don't look. Please don't look." The men chuckled as they climbed into the jeep and shut the doors. Adam, who was behind the wheel, didn't move, despite Seth urging him to drive away to avoid the vile woman. Stephen shook with laughter as Adam revved the engine but still didn't go anywhere. "I'm sure you can hear me," Pamela called out as her mother helped her hobble toward the jeep. The other 2 jeeps pulled away, but Adam continued to wait, even rolling down the window, ignoring the protests from the others. Just as Pamela got within a few feet of the vehicle, Adam suddenly lurched the jeep forward, kicking up a spray of snow and leaving Pamela and her mother standing there. The 2 women cursed loudly at them. "I know you did that on purpose, you scum. Tell Justin." Pamela's voice rang out behind them, but Adam didn't stop. Instead, he started laughing, especially when Seth made the sign of the cross over his chest. "Father Lord, save me from such vultures in female clothing." "Amen," Seth prayed, making all the men burst into laughter. "So Cassie and Juliet are coming with us, Lewis?" "Adam?" Stephen called from the back. "Looks like it," Lewis replied. "That's pretty cool. Maybe they'll decide to stay in New York," Stephen added. "Yeah, maybe," Adam muttered under his breath with a secretive smile. The men followed behind the jeep, carrying Rowan, Grace, Cassandra, Juliet, and Mabel White. Their first stop was the clinic, where they dropped Mabel off before heading to Grace Hamilton's apartment to collect her belongings and transport them to Everly Ranch. Upon arrival, Cassandra and Juliet hurried to their designated cottage to pack, while Lewis, Adam, Stephen, and Seth helped carry their bags to the jeep. "Thank you, boss," Cassandra and Juliet said to Rowan. He nodded with a small smile, giving Grace a sidelong glance. "You're welcome." The 2 women embraced Grace, then did the same with Rowan before hurrying to board the jeep. "Take care, Doc," Adam said to Rowan. Lewis and the others echoed the sentiment. Rowan smiled, nodding in acknowledgement before giving them a final wave as the jeep drove away. "This place is beautiful," Grace murmured, taking in the snow-covered landscape, where the glow of garden lights illuminated the surrounding woods and gardens. "That it is," Rowan agreed. He pressed a kiss to her forehead and gently ushered her inside the cottage. At the airport, the 2 jets were prepped for departure, waiting for the rest of the men to arrive. Andrew, Charles, Aidan, Jake, Anton, and Ash stood outside near the hangar, watching for the incoming vehicles. 5 minutes later, the 2 jeeps came into view. As soon as they arrived, the jeeps came to a halt by the hangar, and the Hawthorne ground crew took charge of the jeeps. The men escorted the ladies to the second jet designated for the staff. As Cassandra and Juliet ascended the stairs, Stephen and Seth ensured their luggage was loaded into the cargo hold. Meanwhile, Lewis, Adam, and the others joined Andrew, who stood with Jake and the rest of the team. "Thanks, man," Lewis said to Andrew, nodding in appreciation. Adam extended a handshake to Andrew, who took it before glancing at the waiting jets. "Let's get out of here." With that, Andrew gave the signal to the airport staff and quickly ascended the stairs of the jet, carrying the Hawthornes and their friends. Jake, Anton, Ash, and Aidan followed him. Charles joined Lewis, Adam, Stephen, Seth, and the others to board the second jet. In the first jet, the pilot announced that they were preparing for takeoff and instructed everyone to take their seats. The cabin crew moved through the aisles, offering assistance as needed. Unlike their flight to Sylvan Ridge, Justin and Tristan were now traveling with the Hawthornes. Liam had been carried to one of the cabins to sleep, while Owen and Tristan sat together, engrossed in a video game. Ian and Sheriff Logan were also in a cabin, and Evangeline had chosen to lie down in another. Tom sat with Nathaniel, joined by Jake and Andrew. Aria, still holding Esme, sat with her Aunt Helena, who was caring for Landon. Anita held Mason, while Anna, Noria, Dawn, and Miss Bella sat nearby. As the jet began taxiing, the cabin crew took their seats. A few minutes later, after the aircraft had taken off and stabilized, they resumed their duties. Tom felt his phone vibrate for what felt like the 100th time that day, and let out an exasperated sigh. "My phone hasn't stopped buzzing since last night, thanks to you, Nate," he said. "You're welcome," Nathaniel replied, taking a sip of water. Tom glared at him. Nathaniel smirked. Jake and Andrew chuckled. "It's quite convenient that none of them can reach you," Tom added. "I have the same problem. I wish I'd been warned," Jake said as he pulled out his phone. "Welcome to my life," Tom muttered. "Boss, we don't even have an office yet," Jake said in amusement. "I'm sure Tom has one to recommend," Nathaniel said with a broad smile. Tom glanced around, searching for something to throw at him. Nathaniel laughed. "Have your architect build one," Tom said, gesturing toward Justin, who was seated nearby with Jaden. Justin froze in his seat when he noticed the men looking at him. "I'm from Sylvan Ridge, guys. I still have to learn how things are done in New York," he said hesitantly. "You poor man. You did agree to work for Nate, didn't you?" Tom asked. Justin swallowed hard. "Build Jake a damn office," Tom ordered. "Yes, sir," Justin replied. "Want me to point you toward a secret weapon?" Jaden whispered close to his ear. Justin tried to ignore how his entire body reacted to the warmth of her breath against his skin. He turned towards her, only for her to make it worse by smiling into his eyes and whispering, "Andrew, if you wanted the skull of a pope, he could probably get you one." She nodded, as if reaffirming the absurdity of her statement. Justin slowly nodded, his gaze lowering to her lips. Jaden suppressed a giggle and leaned in, whispering, "Eyes up here, sir." Justin quickly shifted his gaze upward. "Did you catch what I said?" Jaden asked, her smile laced with amusement. "Yeah, of course. Secret weapon. Andrew," he replied. Meanwhile, on the second jet, as Lewis stepped into the cabin, he saw Dr. Yen pulling Cassandra and Juliet into a hug, brimming with excitement over the last-minute decision for them to join the team traveling to New York. "We're all going to miss Dr. Rowan, but having you two come along is going to be amazing," Yen said enthusiastically. "I think Dr. Williams, Dr. Hawthorne, and I are going to miss Dr. Rowan the most," Claire remarked. "Thank you, Kim," Juliet replied with a warm smile. "It's just for a week," Lewis heard Cassandra say. He lowered his gaze and smiled. "That's my girl." Always keeping it real, he thought to himself. Finding a secluded corner, he appreciated how the jet's interior was designed to provide a degree of privacy. It was going to be a long and exhausting flight, but he was glad he'd be spending it with Cassie. He settled into a back row seat and fastened his seatbelt. A few seats away, Will kept trying to get Kim's attention. He wanted her beside him for the entire flight. He knew she might prefer sitting with the other women, But he didn't care. He wanted her next to him. Before takeoff, he called out to her, drawing everyone's attention. Without hesitation, he said, "Could you come to your seat, babe? Apologies, ladies." The other women responded with smiles. Lewis smirked, pleased that Will had done it so openly. Yen got up to join him. Claire followed suit, moving to sit beside Charles. Juliet scanned the cabin, looking for Adam. He raised his hand from a back seat, signaling her over, and she headed in his direction. Cassandra met Lewis's gaze, holding it for a beat before walking over to him and settling beside him. Without a word, Lewis lifted his hand, resting his elbow on the dividing armrest. Cassandra hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in his. He interlaced their fingers, his grip firm but gentle. "You have no idea how happy I am to have you here," he murmured. Tears blurred Cassandra's vision as she glanced at him from the corner of her eye. Lewis met her gaze, unwavering. "You shed one tear and I'll kiss you right here, right now," he warned, his voice low and rough. A choked laugh bubbled from Cassandra, mixing with a soft sob. She leaned into him, cupping his jaw before pressing her lips to his. She took his lower lip between hers, then his upper one, grazing him with gentle nibbles. "You're playing with fire, Cassie," Lewis warned, his voice husky. "I hope you're ready to get burned." Cassandra's heart trembled in her chest. The heat in his gaze, smoldering, hungry, stole her breath. That he could see all her flaws, all her imperfections, and still look at her like this completely floored her. She felt the need to remind him again about her condition, to make sure he understood what he was getting into. But then she wanted to pinch herself, to give herself a mental shove, to remind herself that this was real, that this man, this remarkable, breathtaking man who could have anyone, wanted her. "I will walk into any fire you set, my love, knowing I am safe in your arms," she whispered against his lips. Lewis felt something deep inside him shift, stirred by the quiet vulnerability in her voice. He cupped the back of her neck with one hand, his fingers threading through her silky hair as he took control of the kiss. Adam helped Juliet fasten her seatbelt before pulling out a blanket and draping it over her legs. Juliet watched him with a soft smile, her heart swelling with affection. As he settled back into his seat and secured his own belt, she cast him a sidelong glance, her gaze filled with quiet adoration. When he finally looked her way, his face lit up with a smile that made Juliet's heart clench. She raised a hand and gently stroked his cheek. Adam leaned in and whispered, "You do know I'm going to get you pregnant, right?" Juliet burst into laughter, framing his face with both hands. "Is that a warning?" she whispered back. "No, it's a certainty. For all you know, you might already be pregnant," Adam replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "Oh, yeah? And what exactly is your intention with that?" she teased, her fingers trailing lightly over his skin. "To keep you with me forever, of course, Dr. Bennett," he quipped before pressing a soft kiss to her lips. A lump formed at the back of Juliet's throat. The words to tell him just how deeply she felt for him sat on the tip of her tongue, but she held back. Instead, she pressed feathery kisses across his face, letting her actions speak for her. "Let's hope the son or daughter we bring into this world doesn't inherit your mischievous streak," she quipped. Adam felt a tightness in his chest at her words. He took it as a sign that she didn't mind the idea of having his child. Letting out a quiet sigh, he leaned back slightly, his gaze locking onto hers, all traces of playfulness fading. Juliet's heartbeat quickened at the depth of emotion in his eyes. As soon as the jet settled into cruising altitude, Charles unfastened Claire's seatbelt and shifted her to sit sideways on his lap. He pulled a double-layered blanket over her legs, tucking it up to her chest before resting her head against his broad torso. Claire smiled to herself as he began to gently rub his hand over her stomach beneath the blanket, his touch soothing. "Is this supposed to relax me, my love?" Claire asked, amusement lacing her voice. "That depends," Charles replied. "On what?" she asked with a soft laugh. "Right now, I just want to feel you close, but if it helps you relax enough to sleep, be my guest," Charles said as his hand moved lower, caressing the lower curve of her baby bump. Claire giggled, but then sucked in a sharp breath when she felt his touch become more intimate, He tilted her chin back, guiding her into a kiss as he leaned down to claim her lips. "I missed you last night," he murmured, his voice low and rough. Claire understood exactly what he meant, and she knew she was in trouble. Charles had been on night patrol, and for some reason, he hadn't allowed the lower-ranked guards to take over. Even Andrew had joined him. She had no idea how they managed to stay awake all night and function the next day, but it was clear Charles had just told her how he intended to spend the few hours before exhaustion caught up with him. She bit her lower lip to keep from moaning as his hand traveled up beneath her dress, gliding upward until it reached her chest. Meanwhile, on the first jet carrying the Hawthornes, the cabin was lively with quiet conversations. Ethan, Alex, Tom Hill, Justin, Jake, Andrew, Anton, and Aidan sat together, discussing the meeting schedules for the stakeholders in the Hawthorne conglomerate. The women, seated separately, spoke in hushed voices. Miss Everly got up now and then to check on Sheriff Logan, who was resting in the private cabin with Ian Blackwood. Both men were asleep, with Nurse Esther and Adam keeping watch. Tristan and Owen remained seated together, while Evangeline occasionally got up to check on Liam, who was resting alone in another cabin. Aria rotated between the triplets, feeding them one after the other, as the women shifted their discussion from fashion to medical innovations, particularly those Farmer Hawthorne was developing in both the ethical and biomedical industries. "Aria, did you know Cassandra Fields has a condition called platelet disorder?" Anna asked. "I saw bruises at the base of her neck and on her forearm. I was so taken aback that I blurted out a question about it. Bless her, she calmly explained the genetic complication, and I felt terrible. Can't something be done?" Aria's expression grew serious. "I had no idea she had that condition," she said, a thoughtful frown forming on her face. "She does a good job of hiding it with her choice of clothing," Dawn added. "I once saw a bruise around her wrists, almost like a handprint. That was after Doug's attack at the hospital." "I assumed it was from how rough he had been with her," Noria said, concern evident in her voice. "I wonder if Dr. Rowan knew. He never mentioned anything," Aria mused. "He might have just been respecting her privacy," Anna responded. Aria nodded in understanding. Nathaniel, overhearing the conversation, raised a hand to pause Alex mid-sentence and addressed the women. "The symptoms of the platelet disorder she appears to have are often genetic, meaning they result from a mutation in the DNA that affects platelet production or function. This can lead to easy bruising, prolonged bleeding, and complications following injuries. Since platelets originate from bone marrow, treatment options are typically limited to symptom management or, in severe cases, a bone marrow transplant." He leaned back, his expression thoughtful. To answer Anna's question, recent advancements in gene therapy, particularly CRISPR gene editing, offer a potential curative approach. CRISPR enables us to target and correct the genetic mutation responsible for the disorder at the DNA level. If successful, this could allow her body to produce functional platelets without the need for transplants or long-term treatment. The main challenge is ensuring that the edited hematopoietic stem cells properly integrate and function as intended. Nathaniel turned his gaze to Aria. "Would you like my team to look into it? If she's open to the idea, we could explore the feasibility of applying CRISPR to treat her condition." Alex leaned back with a knowing smile. Nathaniel's expertise as a pharmacologist centered on drug development, pharmaceutical innovations, and medical intervention technologies. While he wasn't a geneticist or hematologist, his extensive background in medical research and biotechnology made him well-versed in emerging treatments like CRISPR-based therapies. Given Farmer Hawthorne's involvement in advanced biomedical research, Alex knew Nathaniel must have an entire team of geneticists, molecular biologists, and hematologists. With Farmer Hawthorne's reputation for pioneering pharmaceutical advancements, Alex wouldn't be surprised if Nathaniel's next breakthrough product was a treatment for platelet disorders. Alex was certain Ethan was thinking the same thing because he smirked and said, "I bet this is already going on Nathaniel's project list. He works hard and plays hard, and people wonder why he stays at the top of the charts. Even holidays turn into working holidays." Laughter rippled through the cabin. "When the boss pulled out a biosync womb incubator when I needed one, that's when I knew nothing got past him," Jake added, drawing another round of chuckles. Arya smiled, locking eyes with Nathaniel. With a small nod, she said, "Thank you, my love. I'm sure Lewis and Cassie would appreciate any form of intervention." Nathaniel gave a brief nod and pulled out his phone. Alex and Ethan continued teasing him. He ignored them and then discreetly held up a middle finger to Ethan. All the men roared with laughter. The light banter continued until, 4 hours into the journey, Liam woke up feeling rested and much better. Sitting up, a smile spread across his face as he recalled the carnival shenanigans. He got up, put on a jacket, and left the private cabin for the main one. Aidan was the first to notice him and began clapping slowly. Jake soon joined in, followed by the rest of the Hawthorne security team. Ash chuckled as Liam stepped to the end of the aisle and took a bow. Nathaniel, Tom, Ethan, and Alex burst into laughter. Nathaniel held out a hand, signaling for Liam to come to him. Liam started toward his father, but then spotted his uncle Ash sitting alone in a corner seat. Changing direction, he climbed onto the chair beside Ash just so he could hug him. Ash's chest tightened with emotion when Liam murmured, "Thank you, Uncle Ash. Love you loads." Ash gave a firm nod, unable to speak past the lump forming in his throat. After leaving Ash, Liam made his way to Nathaniel, who pressed a kiss to the top of his head. Arya and the other women watched the scene unfold, exchanging curious glances as they wondered what Liam had done to earn an honorary round of applause from his father's men. Owen and Tristan momentarily paused their game to check on him. "Are you feeling better now?" Owen asked with concern. Liam nodded and offered him a fist bump. Owen mimicked the gesture, their fists connecting lightly before Liam did the same with Tristan. As the cabin crew set the tables for breakfast, the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm pastries drifted through the cabin. Attendants carefully arranged fine bone china plates and crystal glassware, ensuring an elegant dining experience. A selection of gourmet dishes was presented on tiered serving trays. One tray featured buttery croissants, pain au chocolat, and Danish pastries, while another held smoked salmon with creme fraiche on toasted brioche, accompanied by truffle-infused scrambled eggs with gold leaf garnish. A third tray displayed a platter of artisan cheeses, dry-aged cured meats, and freshly baked sourdough, complemented by a fourth tray offering an assortment of fruit preserves and imported honey. For a lighter option, there were Greek yogurt parfaits layered with organic granola, fresh berries, and a drizzle of manuka honey. Beverages included freshly squeezed orange, pomegranate, and green detox juices served in chilled stemmed glasses, while custom cappuccinos, espressos, and matcha lattes were prepared to order. As the crew plated the dishes, Arya personally served Liam, Owen, and Tristan each a plate of fluffy Belgian waffles topped with mascarpone and maple-glazed pecans. When one of the servers handed Evangeline a food tray, Arya took it back and returned it to the attendant. "I'll handle her meal." "Thanks," she said. Jake watched, feeling a subtle tightness in his chest as Dr. Hawthorne carefully selected a nutrient-rich plate for Evangeline. Noticing Arya's deliberate choices, Evangeline smiled to herself, appreciating the attention to detail. Arya plated truffle-infused scrambled eggs with sourdough toast for protein and fiber, a Greek yogurt parfait with granola, berries, and manuka honey for probiotics and antioxidants, and a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice for vitamin C and folate. She paired it with sparkling water infused with lemon zest for hydration, and a matcha latte with oat milk as a mild caffeine alternative. When Arya placed the meal in front of her, Evangeline gave her a grateful smile. "Thanks, boss." Arya waved her off dismissively and moved on, carefully selecting Nathaniel's meal next and placing it in front of him with the same quiet attention. She repeated the gesture for Tom, her aunt, and Miss Bella, ensuring each of them had a well-balanced plate. Nathaniel met her gaze, the depth of his affection unmistakable. A surge of love swelled in his chest, and he fought the urge to pull her close. Arya, sensing it, smiled knowingly before returning to her seat, reaching for a flute of sparkling water infused with lemon zest for herself. Much later, Arya signaled to Justin to come and get Tristan. He immediately joined her and she whispered, "I'm going to take the children inside to freshen up." Justin nodded in understanding and reached for Tristan. "All right, let's get cleaned up, son," he said as they headed off together. Nathaniel stood and joined Arya as she guided the twins toward their private cabin. Once inside, he stole a quick kiss from Arya before the boys could see, then announced, "Dad to the rescue!" The twins cheered. "We love you, Mum, but we're men now," Owen declared, making Arya giggle. "All right, men," she teased. "Let me go bring in your brothers and sister, who are still my babies." "We never said we weren't your babies," Liam quickly protested. Nathaniel chuckled as Arya responded, "You've got to pick one, honey. You can't be both." Then, with a playful smile, she breezed towards the exit. The boys exchanged glances, scowling after her. "Come on, boys, let's get cleaned up," Nathaniel said, ushering them forward. Then, as if to soothe their bruised egos, he added, "And just so you know, no matter what she says, you will always be her babies." Back in the main cabin, Andrew, Jake, Aidan, Anton, Ethan, Alex and Tom were still seated together, engaged in conversation, when a crew member approached to summon Andrew. The discussion came to an abrupt halt as all eyes turned to the man. Jake observed him closely, noting the rigid posture and the way his hands were deliberately held at his sides, clear signs that he was trying to appear composed. As Andrew rose, Jake instinctively followed, with Aidan and Anton immediately joining them. The men trailed Andrew toward the front of the cabin where the co-pilot was pacing. Jake felt a jolt in his chest the moment he caught the co-pilot's expression. His eyes were clouded with concern. Something was wrong. Inside the cabin, just as Nathaniel finished helping the children get dressed, the jet lurched violently, jolting them off balance. The cabin lights flickered as a deep rumble reverberated through the aircraft. His heart pounded as the boys cried out, clutching onto him in fear while the turbulence rocked the jet. Nathaniel quickly did a mental calculation of the hours they had spent thus far from Alaska and noted they were closer to New York. Although it was winter and the weather might be unpredictable, he knew just how secure the jet they were in was. It wasn't just a regular jet, it was a state-of-the-art hybrid aircraft designed to transform into a warcraft with an impenetrable body, resistant to bullets and missiles. More than that, it could float like a boat and even submerge underwater if necessary. He had always been particular about air travel since his parents' deaths. Ensuring his mode of transportation was nothing short of the safest, especially when his family was with him. So then he knew whatever had caused that turbulence was definitely not the weather. "Daddy?" Owen called, his searching gaze locking onto Nathaniel's. Nathaniel's heart clenched at the fear in his son's eyes. He was certain Arya would be rushing through that cabin door any second now. Clenching his jaw, he couldn't ignore the thought of what or who might be behind this. Gently, he cupped the boys' faces in his hands and spoke with firm reassurance. "Listen to me. This jet isn't just any aircraft. It's built with the strongest materials, resistant to bullets and missiles. If anything happens, it can transform into a warcraft or even a submarine. No one can take us down. I swear it on your grandparents' grave. We are safe, okay?" The boys, though still shaken, nodded slowly, trusting their father's words. "That is pretty cool, Dad," Owen said in a voice filled with awe. Liam nodded in agreement. "It is cool," he affirmed. Nathaniel managed to smile. "And just in case all else fails," Nathaniel said as he stood up. He quickly crossed the cabin to a side compartment and entered a sequence of numbers into a control panel. The metal plate slid open, revealing 7 emergency backpacks. Nathaniel grabbed one and secured it onto Owen's back before doing the same for Liam. Holding their gazes, he pointed to a button embedded in the left strap. "Look at this button here," he instructed. "If we need to evacuate, press it and don't panic. Let it do its job and get you to safety. Understood?" The boys nodded and managed a shaky grin. "We have enough for Mason, Landon and Esme, right, Dad?" Liam asked, his voice unsteady. "Of course, son, we do. We have one for Tristan and your mum, too," Nathaniel reassured him. Just then, the door swung open, and Arya rushed in, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Nathaniel opened his arms, and she ran straight into them. He held her tightly for a moment before drawing back from her to grab another backpack and securing it onto her. "Nathan, we don't know what's happening. Andrew wouldn't tell us," Arya said in a hushed, urgent tone, pulling Liam and Owen close. Nathaniel cupped her face, meeting her eyes. "You've got to trust me, my love, okay? You do know how much you mean to me, right, baby?" Nathaniel implored, his voice deep and rough with emotion. Arya swallowed hard and gave a slow nod. "Mom, Dad said if we have to evacuate, we just press this button and that's it," Owen quickly explained. "Don't forget," he urged. Arya nodded, lowering her head to press a kiss onto Owen's hair, then Liam's. When she looked back at Nathaniel, he mouthed, "Trust me." The back of her eyelids pricked with tears. Arya nodded again, trying not to let her fear show. She thought they couldn't afford to crash. There were children on board, along with pregnant women and 2 patients. It would be catastrophic for them to go down like this. The jet jolted again, and Nathaniel saw Arya tense, instinctively pulling their boys closer. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around all 3 of them. "I need to get you all back to your seats," he said. "Calm," he urged in a hush, urgent tone. Earlier, outside in the main cabin, Andrew and his men had the co-pilot surrounded near the cockpit. Just before the man could speak, the jet lurched violently, causing every one of them to tense up. A collective gasp rippled through the main cabin as the aircraft trembled from the impact. "Oh my God, the weather must be terrible," Andrew heard Alex say. But Andrew, Aiden, Jake, and Anton knew better. They were under attack. "Jake? Anton? Get to work. Aiden, you know what to do," Andrew said as he sprang into action. He moved to a concealed compartment near the cockpit and used his thumbprint to unlock it, revealing safety gear. The crew members lined up as he distributed emergency backpacks, explaining their functionality. His voice remained low and calm, so much so that one wouldn't think they were under a serious attack. Jake and Anton resisted the urge to rush toward the rear of the main cabin. Instead, they moved swiftly, heading to a specific compartment. Jake accessed it and pulled out emergency gear for the 2 of them. Right there, they changed into their tactical attire before hurrying back toward the cockpit. Ash, who had gotten up to join the men, curious about what was happening, silently reading the body language, tensed up when he saw that Jake and Anton had changed into tactical gear. Jaden immediately rose to secure Tristan in the seat beside Justin. Her eyes met Justin's, silently conveying that something was wrong. Justin swallowed hard, his brows knitting in concern. "Jake? Anton? What's going on?" Tom asked. Ethan started to rise from his seat, but Jake quickly stopped him. "Please stay seated and strap in." Ethan swallowed hard and did as instructed. He had been around Nathaniel's men long enough to know that when they became this serious, it was because something life-threatening was happening. His gaze shifted to Isla, whose eyes were locked on him. He tried to offer a reassuring smile, but he couldn't. He knew something was very wrong. "It's nothing we can't handle, Mr. Hill," Anton responded to Tom's inquiry. "Yeah," Jake added, continuing forward. When they reached the cockpit, Andrew opened the door and addressed the pilot. "Richard, it's time to let my men take over." The pilot nodded, his expression laced with concern, before engaging the autopilot and leaving his seat. Jake and Anton assumed control. Looking through the windshield, they immediately spotted nearly 10 smaller crafts flanking them. Well, if there's one thing I know about Nathaniel Hawthorne, it's that he refuses to let lightning strike twice in the Hawthorne household, Jake muttered as he disengaged autopilot, switching the craft to manual control. Anton placed his thumb on a biometric scanner, unlocking secured panels on the dashboard. He began flipping switches and activating systems. The sound of mechanical components engaging filled the cockpit as an additional layer of armored shielding deployed around the aircraft's exterior. The transformation was underway. The jet was no longer just a transport vessel. It was becoming a warcraft. In the main cabin, Andrew, Aiden, Ash, Jaden, and the other Hawthorne guards moved swiftly, distributing emergency backpacks and ensuring everyone was secured in their seats. Jaden checked that the infants were safely cradled in the arms of the adults before assisting Tristan and Justin in putting on their backpacks and strapping them back in. Ethan and Alex examined the backpacks they had been given. Alex reached into the side pocket, pulled out the instruction manual, and let out a low whistle. "That's what I'm talking about," he murmured in excitement. "I have never in my entire life wished we could crash until now." Ethan said, eyes widening as he scanned the details. Ethan! Anna yelled in admonition from the other side of the aisle. No, baby, read the instructions, Alex said, excitement creeping into his voice. Curious, everyone else started pulling out their manuals. Dad, are we going to crash? Tristan asked his father in a hushed tone. Not if Nathaniel Hawthorne has anything to say about it, Justin muttered to himself with a grin. Then, remembering he was talking to a 7-year-old, he quickly corrected himself. No, son, we're not going to crash, he assured in a firm voice. Still, as much as he shared Ethan's curiosity about testing Nathaniel's so-called safety toys, he would rather not put his son and the rest of the children through that kind of trauma. Across the cabin, murmurs spread as passengers skimmed through the manual, eyes flickering between their backpacks and the instructions in disbelief. Wait, Dawn said, holding up the booklet. This thing deploys into a full-body exosuit with an oxygen supply and propulsion system. Cool. Tom chuckled, watching the younglings get excited about the safety suit, distracting them from the danger they were in. Yeah, Alex confirmed. And it's programmed to fly us straight to the top of Farmer Hawthorne. Auto-navigation, survival gear, reinforced armor, the whole damn package, he listed with excitement. Justin smirked. Nathaniel really doesn't do anything halfway, does he? Jaden exhaled, gripping the backpack straps. Let's just hope we don't have to use them. Ethan and Alex gave her a look that clearly conveyed their disagreement. Justin kept his gaze fixed elsewhere, deliberately avoiding her eyes. Meanwhile, Andrew hurried to the private cabin where Ian and Sheriff Logan were with Nurse Esther and Nurse Paul. Aidan joined him, and together they secured the backpacks for Ian and Sheriff Logan, rousing the two men. What in the world is going on? Sheriff Logan asked, his posture tense, concern evident in his voice. Nothing to worry about, Logan. We've got this, Andrew responded, while Aidan helped the nurses fasten their own backpacks. What is this? A parachute? Ian asked weakly. Nope. Let's hope we don't have to use it, though, Aidan replied with a smirk. Andrew turned to the nurses. Make sure they're strapped in securely, he instructed, gesturing toward the two older men. Yes, Nurse Paul affirmed, while Esther simply nodded, the fear on her face unmistakable. Nathaniel returned with Dr. Hawthorne and the twins. Andrew immediately stepped forward to meet him, giving Dr. Hawthorne and the twins a brief, reassuring nod before locking eyes with Nathaniel. The aircraft is in the process of transformation, boss. Jake and Anton have assumed control, he reported. Nathaniel nodded. That was all he needed to hear. Thank you, Andrew, Nathaniel replied. Without hesitation, he guided Arya and the boys back to their seats and secured their harnesses before taking his place beside Arya, the twins, and the women carrying his triplets. He needed to be close to them, just in case, even though he knew the likelihood of failure was nearly zero. In the cockpit, an automated voice chimed, Transformation complete. Thank you, Sharon. Anton acknowledged the AI system before exhaling. Now let's show these people exactly who Nathaniel Hawthorne is. Jake chuckled and gave Anton a sidelong glance. Ready? Let's do this, Anton replied. Jake suddenly cut the engines and the jet dropped. Charles, Anton called into his comm. A second later, Charles's voice crackled through the cockpit speakers. I was wondering when you clowns would finally join the game, came his familiar drawl. Jake and Anton exchanged amused glances before chuckling. Please tell me it's Anton in the pilot's seat, Charles added. Sorry, just little old me, Jake replied with a smirk. Dear God, who let Jake take control of a jet full of children? Charles quipped. Take it up with Andrew, Jake shot back. He knows who the best is, he added in jest. Here we go again, Anton and Charles groaned simultaneously. Jake just chuckled. All right, what are we dealing with? Anton asked, bringing the conversation back to the mission at hand. A group of professional marksmen. We've already taken down 2, but they mean business, Charles reported. I was supposed to be sleeping through this trip, but now I'd really love some one-on-one combat with these guys. I'm in if you are, Jake said eagerly. We don't have much of a choice. We need to evade them. Going below ground level is our best option. We can't engage in a full-scale attack with women and children on board. Seth's voice came through from the other end. Wait, you made Seth your co-pilot? Jake scoffed. He's gonna be like the angel on your shoulder, never letting the devil get a word in, he needled. Seth chuckled. "Ah-ha. Very funny, Darfield," he replied. "I could knock him out if that helps," Charles chimed in. "Hey," Seth protested. All the men laughed. "We have 8 left," Charles continued. "Let's wrap this up quickly. I really need to sleep," he grumbled. "We've been in the air for almost 5 hours." "What the hell were you doing?" Anton asked, suspicious. Seth cleared his throat loudly in response. Charles sighed. "I swear, Seth, if you make another sound, I'll deliberately crash us just to mess with you," he threatened. "And they say I'm the unstable one," Jake muttered, shaking his head with a grin. The 2 jets dipped to a lower altitude, baiting the remaining enemy crafts into pursuit. Missiles streaked toward them, but the reinforced shielding absorbed the impacts without sustaining damage. Jake caught sight of 2 enemy crafts attempting to retreat. "Not on my watch," he murmured, banking hard to the side and maneuvering for a direct confrontation. Anton launched a counterattack, and the sky ignited in a cascade of fiery explosions. 3 enemy crafts crumpled under the assault. Meanwhile, Charles eliminated 2 more, leaving only 3 hostiles in the air. Sensing they were outmatched, the remaining enemy pilots attempted evasive maneuvers, shifting into a staggered formation to flank the larger jets. "Brace yourself, Charles," Jake warned. He waited for the right moment, watching the crafts adjust their positions. "Hit it!" Anton activated the frequency disruptor, sending a high-frequency wave surging through the air. Charles immediately lunged skyward, dodging the scrambling enemy crafts caught in the disruption. Jake seized the opening, pivoting the jet to face the 2 remaining hostiles and firing. His shots struck true, sending both crafts spiraling in flames. Just as the team thought they had gained the upper hand, a larger enemy craft descended from above, launching a missile directly at Charles. He veered out of the way just in time, but the projectile slammed into the tail of Jake's jet. The cabin shuddered violently, though the reinforced armor held firm. The cockpit door flew open, and Andrew stormed in, his eyes burning with fury. Andrew's voice was firm as he barked orders. "Jake, Anton, enough playing around. We can't keep engaging like this with civilians on board, and we can't waste our fuel. We need to take evasive action. Jake, take us below radar. We're going low. Anton, activate stealth mode. We need to vanish from their systems before they zero in on something critical, like the fuel tanks, damn it." His tone hardened as he added, "Make it happen. Now." Jake and Anton exchanged a brief look, silently syncing their next moves. "Copy that, boss," they responded in unison. Andrew pressed a finger to his earpiece. "Charles, same drill. Take your jet off their radar. We're forcing them to scatter and come looking for us." A crackle of static followed before Charles's voice came through. "Nice strategy. Got it, boss." Andrew returned to his seat and secured his harness as the jet began its controlled descent. Reaching down, he retrieved his tactical pack from where it rested at his feet. Without hesitation, he unzipped it and methodically equipped himself, securing weapons and essential gear with practiced ease. Across the cabin, Nathaniel observed in silence, his sharp gaze taking in every calculated movement. There was no need for words. He recognized the preparation for what it was. They were preparing for combat. Nathaniel took a deep breath and released it slowly. Arya's hand found his, her fingers tightening around his in silent concern. He glanced at her, offering a steady look of reassurance. He thought landing was the right call. It would give them a better chance to get everyone to safety. But it also meant putting his family in the line of fire. He clenched his jaw in contained anger. In the other craft, Charles assessed their position. They were surrounded by an expanse of snow-covered terrain, with towering willow trees lining the landscape. Using his scanner, he located a clearing large enough to accommodate both jets. Confirming its suitability, he transmitted the coordinates to the other jet before initiating the descent. As soon as they touched down, Lewis swung open the cockpit door. His face was a storm of anger, grief, and barely contained fury. "What is it?" Seth asked with bemusement. Charles turned to Lewis, instantly recognizing something was wrong. His stomach tightened. "Who is it?" he asked, his breath hitching. Lewis met his gaze and delivered the blow. Seth and Charles gaped at him. Then Lewis added, "She was out cold. The doctors didn't have a chance to help," he said, his voice hollow. "She's dead, man." Charles's shoulders drooped. He stared. unable to process the words. It wasn't something he could have ever expected. "No," Seth murmured, barely above a whisper. Charles rose to his feet slowly, and Lewis stepped back, giving him space to exit the jet's cockpit. As he entered the main cabin, his gaze traveled to the far end, where William sat with his head buried in his hands. Claire stood nearby with Cassandra, Yen, and Juliet. Charles thought to himself, these were some of the most skilled professionals aboard the jet, and yet he swallowed hard, struggling to contain his emotions. Moving down the aisle, he avoided making eye contact, but the sound of Williams's quiet sobs, along with Mary's and those of the kitchen staff who had accompanied them on the trip, filled the cabin. Still, he forced himself to keep walking. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but he didn't stop until he reached the rear cabin. The door was open. Stepping inside, his breath caught when he saw her lying there, a white sheet already draped over her face. His chest tightened as he reached out, pulling the cover away. He took in a ragged breath, and just before his vision blurred with tears, he thought, she looked peaceful, as if she were merely asleep. "How do we tell the boss?" Adam asked, his voice thick with emotion. Charles shut his eyes, unwilling to turn around just yet. He needed a moment to compose himself, but it was nearly impossible. They all knew exactly what this meant, and worse, they knew Nathaniel Hawthorne wouldn't take it well. She had always been a steadfast reminder of a legacy that should have faded long ago. Yet, like Andrew, Jake, himself, and Tom, she was part of the remnants of a past Nathaniel still clung to. "What exactly happened?" Charles forced himself to ask. His voice was barely audible, the roughness making it sound almost guttural. "I came to check on her because she didn't come out for breakfast," Mary recounted between sobs. "I found her like that, with her hand on her chest." "It was her heart," William said, his voice low, heavy with sorrow. "She went into cardiac arrest." Charles turned to face him, his grief turning into anger, making him lash out. "You're in charge of the staff's medical checkups," he said, his voice tight with barely restrained anger. "And you're telling me you didn't catch that she had a goddamn heart condition?" he growled. "She stopped going for checkups," Mary interjected quickly. "Charles," Claire called softly, stepping forward. "I know what she meant to all of you, to Mr. Hawthorne, but this isn't anyone's fault. She was old, Charles. These things happen." Her voice was gentle, an attempt to calm him. Williams exhaled shakily. "I'm sorry. I should have suspected something was wrong, but with everything that's happened over the past few years with Nate, I let my staff handle the medical evaluations. I didn't know she had stopped going." Charles looked away and walked past Claire without a word. His movements were rigid as he strode past everyone, making his way back to the cockpit. Seth, Adam, Will, Stephen, and Lewis watched in silence as he picked up the radio mouthpiece to contact the other jet. For a moment he hesitated. His hand trembled before he broke down, his shoulders shaking as grief overtook him. The other men let their own tears fall freely as they watched Charles cry. Claire, who had followed him, could hear his ragged breaths, and her chest tightened at the sound. Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to go to him, to hold him, but she knew he wouldn't welcome it. She let out a shaky breath, forcing herself to stay back. "Jake, Anton, this is Charles, over," Charles said, his voice low and rough. "We've landed right beside you, over," Jake promptly responded from the other end. "Best to stay inside and let a few of us sweep the perimeter for any threats, over," Anton added. "We need to be prepared for when they land and come looking, over," Jake said. There was a pause before Charles spoke again, his hesitation noticeable. "Yeah, Jake." On the other end, Jake frowned. He had known Charles for years, through victories and disasters alike, and he could tell something was very wrong. His muscles tensed. "Tell me you guys are all right," Jake asked immediately. "We are," Charles answered, his voice strained. "But something terrible has happened. I need you to get Andrew and Mr. Hill to the cockpit," he implored. "Jesus, Charles, who is it?" Jake asked, his entire frame going rigid. Anton, who had been listening silently, shut his eyes as his pulse quickened. "Just get Andrew and Mr. Hill, Jake," Charles repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jake hesitated briefly, then turned to Anton. Their eyes met, and after a moment, Anton gave a firm nod before getting up to leave. But before he could reach the door, it swung open, and Aidan walked in with Andrew right behind him. One look at Jake and Anton's faces made both Andrew and Aidan stop in their tracks. "What happened?" they asked in unison. "Aidan, get Mr. Hill," Jake said solemnly. Aidan nodded and quickly left. Andrew stepped forward and shut the door behind him, his gaze shifting between Jake and Anton. His gut churned with a sense of impending loss. "Who is it?" he asked, his voice quieter now as if bracing for impact. Before anyone could answer, the door opened again, and Aidan returned with Mr. Hill. The older man had a bemused frown on his face, but as his eyes swept over the room and landed on the men's expressions, his face fell. He exhaled deeply, shut the door behind him, and pinched the bridge of his nose as if trying to steady himself. Still on the radio, Charles finally spoke again. "Can you all hear me?" "Yes, Charles," Andrew replied. There was a beat of silence before Charles delivered the words that made the air feel heavier. "Miss Jonas passed. Her heart gave out. She's gone." Andrew took a slow step backward, and then another, until his back met the cold paneling of the jet. Tom lowered himself into a crouch, letting out a deep, guttural sound of grief. Aidan stood frozen, his face reflecting raw shock, his eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Anton shut his eyes and slumped into a chair, cursing under his breath. Jake remained motionless, gripping the radio tightly as if he hadn't heard right. "Miss Jonas," he finally said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Our Miss Jonas," he repeated, as if Charles may have been mistaken. "Yeah," Charles confirmed, his voice hollow. "Our Miss Jonas," he reaffirmed. "Oh, Gray is as good as dead," Tom snarled. "At first I thought bankruptcy would be enough, but after this, no. There's no way her heart just gave out on its own." His voice was low, weighted with restrained fury. "This is too much. How the hell am I supposed to tell Nate? Damn it!" Miss Jonas was like a second mother to him, and she died like this, in a plane. Andrew couldn't speak. A cold numbness settled inside him. Miss Jonas had been a cornerstone of Nathaniel's life. He wouldn't eat anyone's cooking but hers, except for the rare times Dr. Hawthorne stepped in to take over. She had been there for as long as any of them could remember. Mr. Hill was right. How were they supposed to break this to Nathaniel? Andrew hated this. He had been the one, alongside Mr. Hill, to deliver the news of Nathaniel's parents' accident. And now, this. "Do we wait until we get to the house?" Aidan asked, his voice low and gruff. "I don't know how we're supposed to keep this from him, Aidan," Andrew admitted, sounding exhausted by the weight of it. A mechanical voice suddenly echoed through the cockpit. "Incoming threat detected." "We've got incoming." Charles's voice came through the comms. "Roger that," Anton responded immediately. Jake exhaled and pushed himself up from his seat. "Let's take care of the immediate threat so we don't lose anyone else," he said quietly. The men nodded in grim agreement. Inside the cabin, as soon as the jet touched down, Nathaniel stood. Arya's heart skipped a beat. "Babe, where are you going?" she asked. Nathaniel glanced in her direction and managed a small smile. "Just want to get on top of things," he replied. "Dad, don't go too far," Owen said. Nathaniel nodded with another brief smile before striding across the aisle and disappearing into the rear cabin. He moved quickly to a secured panel, pressing his fingerprint against the scanner. The compartment unlocked, and he retrieved a firearm, tucking it into the back of his waistband. Then, he pulled out 2 hunting knives. One he slid into his sock, the other inside his jacket. Next, he strapped on a futuristic digital watch and grabbed extras, placing them into a bag. He intended to distribute them to the triplets, the twins, Arya, Tristan, Evangeline, Anita, Miss Everly, Anna, Isla, Dawn, Noria, Miss Bella, Tom, Alex, and Ethan. Returning to the main cabin, he handed out the digital watches, instructing everyone to wear them. He gave Anita, Anna, and Noria 2 each, and asked them to strap one onto each of the triplets' wrists. When it was Arya's turn, he fastened hers himself, holding her gaze as he secured the device around her wrist. "What's this for?" Miss Everly asked, As she fastened the oversized yet weightless watch onto Mason's tiny wrist, the little boy blinked up at her with curiosity. The older woman smiled lovingly at him. "It's not from me, little one. It's from your daddy. A gift from your dada," she cooed softly. "It's extra protection," Nathaniel answered vaguely. Arya smiled at that. "It looks cool, Dad," Liam grinned, holding up his wrist for his father to see. Owen imitated the act. "Yeah, pretty cool," Nathaniel replied, but his attention shifted. His gaze darted toward where Tom had been sitting, only to find the seat empty. "Ethan?" he asked. "Where's Tom?" "Aiden just came to get him," Ethan replied. Nathaniel's brows furrowed at that. His attention flicked toward the cockpit just as Tom emerged, followed closely by Andrew, Aiden, and Jake. The sight of them made something in his chest tighten. He studied them carefully, and at that moment he was certain both Tom and Andrew had been crying. His heartbeat stuttered. Something was wrong. The men avoided his gaze as Andrew silently signaled the others to meet him at the rear of the cabin. "What's going on?" Nathaniel asked as soon as Andrew stepped closer. "We need to engage in direct combat. I'll select the men who will go and those who will stay behind to secure the jet," Andrew said. Nathaniel didn't respond right away. He simply observed as Tom returned to his seat, his face slightly lowered, avoiding eye contact. Jake, Anton, and Aiden did the same. Nathaniel narrowed his eyes, sensing something was off, but whatever it was, they were clearly keeping it from him. He gave a small nod, and Andrew strode past him. Nathaniel turned his attention to Jaden, who had risen to her feet, stepping toward the men. "How can I help?" she asked. "You'll stay here," Andrew instructed. "I'm taking Jake, Ash, and Aiden with me. Charles, Lewis, and Adam will join us from the other jet." He headed toward the rear, where Jade and Aiden were already gearing up. "Anton," Andrew called, silently gesturing to him to go take charge of the jet controls. Anton raised a thumbs up before heading back to the cockpit. Ash joined the team, strapping on his gear. Richard moved to the aircraft's exit and released the hatch. Outside the jet, the dry, biting air of the snow-covered landscape hit their masked faces. Andrew, Jake, Aiden, and Ash stepped down from the craft, their boots sinking slightly into the frozen ground. Jaden and another guard assisted Richard in securing the door before taking up position by the exit. Nathaniel passed sheathed sidearms to Ethan and Alex. Without hesitation, they armed themselves and moved to cover the exit as well. Jaden gave them a nod of acknowledgement. Charles, Lewis, and Adam joined Andrew's unit. Without speaking, Andrew raised a clenched fist to Charles, and the two bumped knuckles before striking their chests, a silent gesture of resolve. Charles repeated the ritual with Jake and Aiden. Ash, lagging behind with his weapons secured, watched the older men grieve in their own way, holding themselves together to prevent mass distress, at least for now. He didn't try to join in, and neither did Lewis nor Adam. Instead, the three of them fell into step together, allowing Andrew, Aiden, Jake, and Charles to take the lead. Ash tried not to think about Miss Jonas, but it was impossible. Her warm smile and ever-ready, comforting meals replayed in his mind. Tears welled up and slipped down his face beneath his mask. He was grateful for it. The mask. He wasn't used to emotions, much less expressing them, but even he couldn't ignore the pain of this loss or the consequences it would bring. Miss Jonas was like a mother figure to all of them. Though Ash knew Mary had been trained to take over, and most wouldn't even be able to tell the difference between their cooking, there had always been a sense of comfort, knowing Miss Jonas was behind it all. He'd never really thought about her age before, but now, as he reflected, he realized she must have been in her 70s, though he couldn't be certain. She was always so active, always working. In all the times he had wandered into the kitchen, she had never once not been there. That thought unsettled him. How lonely had her life been? Had she ever had anything outside of her job? Had she been married? Had children? He hated that he didn't know the answers. "Spread out, make sure they don't get past you," Andrew instructed. The team automatically moved into position, creating a defensive perimeter around the jets. Each operative maintained a strategic distance from the others, ensuring full coverage. Andrew knew that with the jet's camouflage blending into the dense vegetation and snowy plains, it would be difficult to detect from above. However, if enemy forces got close enough on foot, they would eventually notice the subtle distortion in the landscape. Charles remained in position, gripping his weapon, waiting for the first unfortunate target to step into his line of sight. Then he heard it, the synchronized crunch of boots pressing into the snow. They were quiet. Too quiet. If the team hadn't been prepared, they likely wouldn't have detected their approach. He inhaled deeply, controlling his breathing, and then he saw them. The vast terrain, partially shadowed by dense foliage, made visibility difficult, but with the aid of his thermal goggles, the enemy came into view. Dozens of figures clad in snow-white tactical gear, slithering through the undergrowth like specters. There weren't just 10 or 20. Everywhere Charles looked, they kept coming. So this was Gray's strategy. Overwhelm them with sheer numbers, hoping to exploit their smaller force. But Charles couldn't help but feel a tinge of amusement. If Gray thought numbers alone would be enough, he had gravely underestimated them. Nathaniel's technology, his weapons, his defensive gear, was designed exclusively for them. Cutting edge, one of a kind, and capable of shifting the tide of battle in their favor. Without it, things might have been challenging. But impossible? Not a chance. Andrew, monitoring the approaching forces, spoke into the comms. Gas! The command filtered through every earpiece. Without hesitation, each operative retrieved a gas canister and tossed it into the enemy's path. The metal cylinders hit the snow with soft thuds before hissing open. Within moments, a thick, colorless vapor spread, seamlessly blending with the fog rolling through the underbrush. Hold, Andrew whispered. He didn't want the team to attack too soon. Not until they were certain the gas had taken effect, and the enemy's positions were fully exposed. Then the coughing started. It was faint at first, a single ragged breath, then another. Within seconds, the sound of hacking and choking filled the air. Fall back, fall back. Anton, having hacked into the enemy's communications, transmitted the message to the team, allowing Andrew and the others to hear exactly what their opponents were saying. What? We're being hit with something. There's something in the air, a panicked voice responded. Andrew smirked. The gas was designed to be undetectable, odorless, blending with its surroundings. Whatever scent it mimicked, it had fooled them completely. More importantly, it was fast-acting. Even the one transmitting the warning would soon succumb. The chorus of desperate, struggling breaths grew louder, betraying the exact locations of their enemies. Jake crouched, watching as the first of them dropped to their knees. Wait, Andrew murmured again. He wanted to see if reinforcements would arrive. For 10 minutes they listened. The wind howled across the frozen expanse. Then the sky broke open. Paratroopers, dozens of them. Now, Andrew ordered. Charles unsheathed his knives. As if the entire team had anticipated the order, they moved in unison. The moment the first paratrooper neared the ground, a blade found its mark. Another operative intercepted a soldier mid-descent, sending his body crashing into the trees. Some who managed to land were immediately entangled in their parachutes, making them easy prey. The Hawthorne team worked efficiently, eliminating targets before they had a chance to regroup. Anton, take out their craft, Andrew commanded. Roger that, came Anton's response. Then Andrew moved in. 3 enemy operatives, slightly battered from their landing but still functional, surrounded Jake. Jake smirked. I need you to remember something before you die. My name is Jake Darfield. I am who they called the Punisher. Gunfire erupted. Jake dropped low, dodging the first barrage of bullets, then pivoted, unloading his automatic shotgun in tight, calculated bursts. Each shot sent an enemy collapsing into the snow. The moment the last one hit the ground, more came charging in. The battlefield erupted into close-quarters combat. The Hawthorne team held their positions, knowing full well that they were the last line of defense between the enemy and the jets, where their families waited. Any soldier who broke past their formation was swiftly taken down by another operative. A thunderous explosion shook the ground as Anton locked onto the enemy transport craft, launching a missile programmed to pursue its target relentlessly. The projectile streaked through the air, its fiery trail illuminating the snowy expanse before slamming into the aircraft. The impact sent a fireball erupting into the sky, forcing the pilots into evasive maneuvers as more men scrambled to jump from the burning wreck. Seth, manning the secondary jet's weapons system, took aim and fired. the air filled with blazing parachutes and bodies plummeting like dead birds. Those who didn't burn midair crashed into the snow, some slamming into trees, others landing on jagged rock formations. The few who managed to survive the descent encountered Andrew's team. For 30 minutes, gunfire and hand-to-hand combat raged as Andrew and his men held their ground. 5 hostiles managed to slip past their defensive line, making a direct push toward the jet. They unleashed a barrage of bullets at the exit door and reinforced windows, but when they realized they were only wasting ammunition, one of them pivoted toward the jet's landing gear. From the cockpit, Anton and Seth tracked their movements and immediately alerted the cabin. 5 hostiles targeting the jet, Seth reported. Jaden, who had been monitoring the situation, sat up. Justin watched her warily, worried she might have to enter the fight. But when she responded with a calm, "Roger that," he tensed. Jaden grabbed her weapon and unlatched the door. Nathaniel, Alex, and Ethan rose to their feet. "Talk to me," Nathaniel said as he approached her. "We've got 5 men trying to sabotage the jet," Jaden supplied. Nathaniel gave a single nod, unholstering his firearm. From across the cabin, Aria, who had stirred at the sound of the hatch opening, caught sight of him. Her heart clenched. She barely had time to call out before he disappeared through the exit. "Please, please, keep him safe," she silently prayed. Jaden, Nathaniel, Ethan, and Alex descended the mechanical stairs as they lowered to the ground. Nathaniel gripped his weapon, following Jaden's lead. The enemy had spread out, knives in hand, preparing for vandalism. Jaden signaled, designating targets, one for herself, another for Nathaniel, and the last 2 split between Alex and Ethan. The moment they had clear shots, they fired. Jaden and Nathaniel's bullets found their marks, each dropping an enemy with a headshot. Ethan's round tore into his target's back, and Alex disabled his with a well-placed shot to the leg. The final operative ducked, pivoted, and opened fire in retaliation. Nathaniel and Jaden reacted instantly, returning fire. It took 2 shots before the attacker finally collapsed. They crouched behind the jet for cover, ears tuned to the distant echoes of combat, where Andrew's team continued their fight. "You should go back inside, boss," Jaden said, tension lacing her voice. The last thing she wanted was for Nathaniel to be exposed in the crossfire. No matter how capable he was, she'd rather take the risk herself than have to explain to Andrew why Nathaniel had been injured. Or worse. Nathaniel smirked. "We'll keep you company for a bit, Jaden. Relax. I don't plan on dying on you." Jaden exhaled a soft chuckle. Alex and Ethan laughed as well. "I don't know about you all, but I'm seeing this as an opportunity to test something." Before Ethan could finish, a bullet streaked toward him. A translucent shield flickered to life around him. A protective energy barrier activated by the device on his wrist, courtesy of Nathaniel's technology. The bullet bounced off harmlessly, falling into the snow. Nathaniel took a step away from the group, raised his gun, and fired. The enemy sniper crumpled instantly. Ethan inhaled sharply, eyes wide. Jaden's pulse spiked. She thought Ethan Blackwood was done for. "Yo!" Ethan shouted, his voice barely containing his exhilaration. "Shut it!" Alex hissed. "Did you see that? Did you freaking see that?" Ethan whispered excitedly. He grinned, practically vibrating with adrenaline, and threw a fist into the air. "I'm invincible!" He turned as if to run toward the battlefield. Nathaniel grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back. "Where the hell do you think you're going?" he growled. "I'm joining the fight," Ethan grinned. "I'm literally untouchable." Nathaniel shook his head, smirking. "Stay with me, super invisible goatee, and watch the jet." Alex chuckled. "You guys are no fun," Ethan muttered, but he stayed close to Nathaniel anyway. Aria, Anita, Justin, Evangeline, Noria, and Dawn watched from the jet's window, chuckling as Nathaniel yanked Ethan back by the collar of his jacket. In a corner, Owen, Liam, and Tristan peered out of another window, stifling laughter. "I don't think Uncle Ethan can fight. He's like my dad," Tristan said, grinning. Justin chuckled. "I'm never going to hear the end of that." Meanwhile, Andrew and his team maintained their perimeter, scanning for any remaining threats. When it became clear that no more hostiles were approaching, they shifted their focus to searching for survivors. Nathaniel's team had already secured one, Alex's target, the man he had shot in the leg. Alex had bound him and dragged him to the foot of the plane, securing him to the landing gear. A short distance away, Ash found another enemy combatant struggling to breathe, still suffering from the effects of the gas. Crouching beside him, Ash held up a sealed respirator. "I've got medics who can help you," he said, "but only if you tell me who sent you. Otherwise..." He straightened and shrugged. "No telling what lives in these woods." The man's gaze flickered with uncertainty. "You're just a kid," he rasped. "Well, this kid is your only shot at surviving," Ash retorted. The man wheezed, swallowing hard. "Get me the one in charge." Andrew approached, stopping beside Ash and looking down at the captive. "Names," he demanded. The man hesitated, then exhaled shakily. "Gray, Francis Holloway, Joseph Aldridge, Leonard Whitaker." He paused before adding, "And help me." Andrew nodded slightly, understanding the man's play. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the clearing as the man slumped lifelessly to the ground. "Let's go," Andrew said, turning away. Ash knew Andrew wasn't one to execute captives unless necessary. The fact that he had just done so meant he was furious. As they walked back toward the jet, Nathaniel stood outside, bodies strewn around him. Andrew caught Jaden's gaze and she gave a small shake of her head, silently indicating that she had no influence over whatever had just happened. Andrew was about to tell Nathaniel to head inside when he noticed the prisoner tied to the landing gear, Alex standing guard beside him. "They were trying to sabotage the jets," Jaden explained quickly. Andrew gave a curt nod. "We should go inside, boss," he said, his voice carefully controlled. He was grateful for the mask covering his face, ensuring Nathaniel wouldn't be able to read his expression. Nathaniel nodded and gestured for Ethan and Alex to follow him. They climbed aboard, joined by Charles, Lewis, and Adam, who returned to the other jet. Ash, Aiden, and Jake followed Nathaniel up the stairs. Jaden lingered, waiting for Andrew's decision on what to do with the remaining prisoner. She expected an interrogation, or perhaps a plan to take him along. But as soon as Nathaniel and the others were inside, Andrew gave her a subtle motion to follow as well. She hesitated. Andrew turned toward the captive, untied him, and pressed a gun to his head. "Names?" he asked. "Fuck you!" the man spat, his voice laced with pain. Andrew drove the barrel of the gun harder against his temple. "Names?" Jaden stiffened. This wasn't the controlled, level-headed Andrew she was used to. The man let out a pained grunt, spitting blood onto the snow. Andrew struck him across the temple with the butt of his gun. A sharp crack sounded as a gash opened, blood trickling down the side of the man's face. "Names?" Andrew repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. The man groaned, looking up at him, but he remained silent. Andrew struck him twice more, quick, brutal blows that even made Jaden flinch. "Names?" "You bastard," the man snarled. But before Andrew could strike him again, he spat out, "Leonard Whitaker, Francis Holloway, Joseph Aldridge, Gray, and Bastian Vale." Andrew didn't pause. He took a step back and fired 2 rounds into the man's head. Jaden's eyes widened slightly. Something is wrong. As Andrew turned toward her, she stepped onto the jet stairs, allowing them to lift her into the cabin. The stairs lowered again for Andrew. Jaden waited by the entrance, watching as he boarded, his posture rigid, his movements controlled but unyielding. Her brows furrowed as he strode past her without a word. Earlier, as Nathaniel re-entered the jet, he met Arya's gaze and winked at her while walking past her seat. Owen, Liam, and Tristan cheered, making him chuckle. Ethan grinned at Isla, who had witnessed everything from inside the jet. She shook her head at him, amused, then giggled at his antics. Anna beamed at Alex, having seen him take part in defending them. Nathaniel went to change and then returned to his seat beside Arya. She wanted nothing more than to curl up in his arms, but held back, knowing she couldn't in a jet full of people. Still, she was just relieved he was back and safe. Owen and Liam climbed onto Nathaniel's legs while Arya settled for holding his hand. "Dad?" Liam called, settling on one of his father's legs while Owen sat on the other, leaning back against Nathaniel's chest. Nathaniel grinned. "I promise you have my full attention, Liam," he quipped, teasing Liam's habit of framing people's faces to make sure they were listening. Owen laughed. Liam grinned and said, "We saw you, Daddy. You were awesome. I want to fight like you when I grow up." "Good," Andrew or Jake can train you, Nathaniel said. I think I want Uncle Ash to teach me. He can stop cars with his bare hands. Liam whispered conspiratorially. Arya laughed and playfully tugged Liam's nose, making him giggle. Nathaniel chuckled. What if I told you that Jake and Andrew taught Ash how to fight? Nathaniel whispered back. Liam's eyes widened. Okay, Uncle Jake, then. Uncle Andrew taught Daddy, though, Owen added. I can learn from both of them. Right, Dad? Liam asked, cupping his father's face again. Yes, son, you can learn from both, Nathaniel affirmed, smiling. Liam nodded in satisfaction and hugged his father. Nathaniel pressed a kiss to his hair. Meanwhile, Jake returned to the cockpit and joined Anton. They continued scanning the area for potential threats. I hacked into their comms earlier and intercepted some of their transmissions, but it's been silent for a while now, Anton reported. Jake nodded but remained cautious. Despite the radio silence, they stayed on alert. 30 minutes later, Jake opened a secure channel to Charles on the other jet. I've got nothing here. No sign of any threats for miles. What about your end? Charles' voice crackled through. Nothing. Let's move, but we'll fly low to avoid detection in case any enemy aircraft are lying in wait, Jake said. Roger that, Charles responded. Jake took a deep breath before guiding the jet back into the air. Flying below radar altitude, they resumed their journey, with Charles's jet trailing closely behind. Anita couldn't help but notice that Andrew hadn't returned to his seat, nor had Aidan or Ash. All three remained near the cockpit area, standing at the front of the main cabin. She figured they were staying on high alert in case of another attack. Saying a silent prayer, she hoped they would all make it home in one piece. About 4 hours later, they arrived at the private hangar of Hawthorne Aviation. The journey, originally estimated to take 9 hours from Alaska to New York, had stretched to 12. Since they had departed Alaska at 10 p.m., it was already 2 p.m. Eastern Time when they landed in New York. As the aircraft taxied to a stop, the ground crew hurried out to perform their duties while everyone disembarked. Andrew had no intention of blindsiding Nathaniel by having the Hawthorne security team unload Miss Jonas's body in front of him at the airport. Instead, he ensured that the convoy carrying Nathaniel, Dr. Hawthorne, the children, Evangeline, Anita, Anna, Alex, Ethan, Claire, Miss Bella, Miss Everly, Sheriff Logan, and Ian departed for the estate under heavy security. He remained behind, waiting for the casket he had arranged to be delivered so that Miss Jonas's body could be placed in it. Are we taking her to the morgue from here? Dr. Williams asked. Not yet, the boss will want to see her first, Andrew replied. Williams nodded and stepped back. By the time the vehicle carrying Miss Jonas arrived at the Hawthorne estate, Nathaniel and the rest of the family were in the living room while the staff sorted through their luggage. Tom waited in the foyer for Andrew's call, which came just as the convoy reached the estate's gate. Do you want to do this alone? Andrew asked, or do you want to wait for me? I'll call him outside. I don't think much needs to be said once he sees the casket, Tom said in a weary tone. All right, Andrew responded and ended the call. As Tom turned around, he saw Jake and Aidan watching him. He gestured for them to wait before striding toward the living room. Nathaniel stood by the window, arms folded, while the others chatted about the trip. Tom crossed the room to stand beside him, dreading what he was about to do. He hated that he was about to bring Nathaniel more grief, but there was no avoiding it. Miss Jonas had been a cornerstone of the household, and Nathaniel would notice soon enough that she wasn't at her post. Nate! Tom called, drawing Nathaniel's attention. Nathaniel turned to him, immediately noting Tom's red, puffy eyes. His heart skipped a beat. What is it? Nathaniel asked, his tone hesitant. Please come with me, Tom said, stepping back. Nathaniel gave him a searching look, his brow furrowing, then followed. Arya, watching from the living room, noticed the way the two men left. A sense of unease crept over her, prompting her to get up and trail after them. She stopped at the entrance as they stepped outside onto the porch. Letting out a sigh, she turned and headed toward the kitchen instead. As soon as she entered, she saw Mary and the entire kitchen staff gathered around the massive island table. Mary was crying, along with several of the others. Arya's brows knitted together as she strode in. Hello? She said, just to draw their attention. The staff turned, startled. Mary quickly tried to compose herself. while a few of the younger staff members ducked behind the others as if to hide. "Yes, Dr. Hawthorne, do you need anything?" Mary asked, her voice uneven. Aria moved further into the kitchen, her gaze darting from one person to another. Without even realizing it, she was searching for Miss Jonas's familiar presence. "Where is Miss Jonas?" she asked. Mary visibly fought to contain her emotions. Aria's heart picked up speed. "Mary?" she pressed, dread creeping into her voice. "Where is Miss Jonas?" "I'm so sorry, Mum," Mary whispered. "We were supposed to keep quiet until the boss found out." Aria was already shaking her head in denial before Mary could finish. "She passed on, Mum," Mary finally said. "She died on the plane." "No," Aria whispered, her eyes widening. "No." Her voice trembled as if refusing to accept the words. Just then, Anita entered the kitchen and saw Aria standing apart from the staff, one hand pressed against her chest, the other covering her mouth. "Aria, what's going on?" Anita asked, hesitantly stepping forward, a flicker of fear in her eyes. Aria turned to her, tears spilling freely down her face. Mary said that Miss Jonas..." She broke off, shaking her head again. "No, that can't be true." Anita, Mary, and two of the staff hurried to her. Anita wrapped her arms around Aria, holding her tightly. "Oh my God! Nathan!" Aria sobbed, knowing just how much Miss Jonas meant to him. "Let's go to him," Anita said gently, pulling back slightly to frame Aria's face in her hands. "You have to be strong for him." It dawned on Anita then why the men had been distant and cold during the last hours of the flight. "Damn it," she muttered, her heart breaking for them all. Miss Jonas was like a mother to them, the woman who had nourished them for years. It wasn't just Nathaniel who would take this hard. Every Hawthorne man would feel the weight of her loss. Outside, Nathaniel followed Tom toward the waiting jeep. Looking over his shoulder, he saw Jake, Aidan, and Ash before reverting his gaze forward. Charles, Anton, Seth, Gabriel, Jordan, Stephen, Will, Adam, Lewis, Drew, Josh, Thomas, Tyrone, and the rest of his men stood with the estate staff, waiting in solemn silence. Nathaniel remembered the last time he had seen something like this. The first was when his parents died, and the second was when they all found out he had cancer. He stopped at the porch stairs, taking a deep breath. Lowering his face, his fists clenched. Without looking at Tom, he asked, "Who is it? Who did I lose?" His voice was low, barely audible. "Miss Jonas," Tom said. "What?" Nathaniel rasped, his head snapping up as his gaze locked onto Tom's. "I'm so sorry, son," Tom said quietly. "Miss Jonas? My Miss Jonas?" Nathaniel repeated, his voice strained. Tom nodded. Nathaniel slowly sat down on the porch. Jake looked away and Charles did the same, unable to bear watching, but Andrew didn't look away. He needed to see. He needed to feel this pain and grief, to fuel the rage already burning inside him, to ensure that every single person responsible for this paid the price. Nathaniel buried his face in his hands, struggling to contain his emotions, but it was nearly impossible. Miss Jonas was his mother's legacy, just as Tom, Andrew, Jake, and Charles were his father's. They were the guardians his parents had left behind to help him cope with their loss. "Are you sure?" Nathaniel forced himself to ask. His voice held the agony of a boy who had already endured too much loss. Tom turned away, his own tears falling. "Yes, Nate." Dr. Williams stepped forward. "It was her heart," he explained. Nathaniel stood walking toward the jeep. Andrew had the casket brought out and unsealed it, revealing the woman inside. Nathaniel stood there, staring, until his vision blurred with tears. He told himself that people were watching, that he needed to keep himself together. But this was Miss Jonas, the woman who had been there for as long as he could remember. She had always found creative ways to make meals he loved, just to keep him happy, to bring a smile to his face. The commotion outside drew the attention of those inside the house, and one by one they drifted onto the porch. Ethan, Alex, Anna, Justin, Miss Bella, Miss Everly, and the children. Noria and Evangeline held the boys back from rushing to their father. Aria and Anita joined them. Aria descended the stairs slowly, feeling utterly helpless. "Who is it, Mum?" Nathaniel heard Liam's tearful voice ask. Jake moved swiftly, picking up both Liam and Owen before carrying them inside. "Who is it, Uncle Jake?" the boys asked through their tears. Jake exhaled softly, holding them close. "It's Miss Jonas," he said. "She's gone to be with your grandparents." "But we want her here," Owen sobbed. "I'm sorry, kid," Jake said gently. She was old and her heart gave out. The boys clung to him, their cries muffled against his chest. "You can't die, Uncle Jake," Liam choked out between sobs. "Even when you're old, I forbid it." Jake let out a soft chuckle, though his voice held emotion. "All right, Liam, no dying for me," he promised. Justin, standing with Tristan, pulled him close as they all watched. Jaden understood then. She understood Andrew's cold withdrawal. She realized that if she had known earlier, she wouldn't have been so easy on their attackers. But she was sure they would get their chance, because there were names, and they would not be forgotten. Leonard Whitaker, Francis Holloway, Joseph Aldridge, Gray, and Bastian Vale. She silently recited them. Nathaniel nodded, and Andrew replaced the cover on the casket. Stepping forward, Nathaniel rested a hand on it. "Thank you, Miss Jonas. Say hi to Mum and Dad for me, will you?" he murmured, then stepped back. Andrew signaled for the casket to be placed back inside the Jeep. "The ambulance will be here soon," Dr. Williams said to Andrew. "They're on their way." Andrew gave a curt nod. Nathaniel climbed back up the porch, refusing to meet anyone's gaze, not even Arya's. He walked past them all and entered the house, heading straight for his study. "Go to him," Tom instructed. "Ethan, Alex, Miss Morris, Dr. Hawthorne. Don't leave him alone, even if he asks you to." Arya nodded, and Ethan exhaled heavily. Alex hurried up the stairs, following after Nathaniel. Inside his study, Nathaniel went straight to the liquor cabinet. He needed to rein in his emotions before he said or did something he'd regret. He tried to rationalize Miss Jonas's death. She was old and she never stopped working. But that thought led him to another. Williams was in charge of their medical welfare. How had he not detected that Miss Jonas had a heart condition? A wave of anger flared in Nathaniel, and he took a long swallow of alcohol, forcing himself to stay rational. Williams was just one man, responsible for not only Nathaniel but his children, the entire household staff, and his duties as an on-call physician. He traveled constantly at Nathaniel's side. When would he have had the opportunity to diagnose Miss Jonas? Nathaniel inhaled deeply, his anger ebbing slightly, until another thought took hold. If Williams couldn't oversee everything, he must have delegated responsibility to someone else, someone who had failed. There was an agreement in place. If any member of Nathaniel's household developed a serious medical condition, he was to be informed immediately. Someone had broken that contract. A growl rumbled in his chest as his grip on the glass tightened. His breaths came slower, more controlled, as his mind centered on where Miss Jonas had suffered the fatal attack. His thoughts fixated on Gray and whoever else he had managed to manipulate into his schemes. He turned abruptly, ready to go find Andrew. But before he could, Arya walked in, followed by Ethan, Alex, and Anna. Nathaniel clenched his fists, avoiding their eyes, knowing that meeting their gazes would be his undoing. "I am so sorry, my love," Arya whispered through her sobs. The sound of her crying did something to him. It struck him deep, reminding him that she had known Miss Jonas too. She was grieving as well. "I was not here when you lost your parents," Arya continued, "and I hated that I wasn't there for you. But I'm here now, Nathan. Please, let me in," she implored with feeling. "Nate," Ethan said, his voice quiet, heavy with emotion. "We know, brother. We understand how much this hurts. I should know. I just lost a mother too. Please, let us be here for you." "Please, Pookie Bear," Anna pleaded softly. "We knew her too, Nate. We're grieving her too," Alex added. Nathaniel slowly nodded, his face lifting as he met their gazes one after the other. "She was my mum's cook," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Arya rushed into his arms and he held her tightly. Anna joined, hugging him from behind Arya. Alex and Ethan stepped forward, wrapping their arms around them in a shared embrace. "We're here," Arya whispered against his chest, "and we love you so much." Andrew stood outside the study, listening, waiting. He let out a quiet sigh of relief when he heard Dr. Hawthorne's voice, reassured by the calm authority she carried as she soothed Nathaniel. Tears blurred his vision when Nathaniel mentioned that Miss Jonas had been his mother's cook. Andrew was grateful that Dr. Hawthorne, along with Nathaniel's closest friends, understood the weight of that statement. "Let's go upstairs," he heard Dr. Hawthorne say. "I need to speak with Andrew," Nathaniel replied. "No, you don't," she countered gently. "Aria," Nathaniel insisted, "you're upset, my love. I don't want you to react right now. Give it a few hours, please," she pleaded. Andrew nodded to himself in approval, hoping Nathaniel would listen. "Babe, I just want to ask a question," Nathaniel argued. "You'll get all your answers," she assured him. "Williams is already terrified, and I know you. Come, please. Let's go upstairs." "Listen to her, Nate," Anna added. "She's right," Alex chimed in. "You need to step back just for a bit. Whatever needs to be handled, Tom, Andrew, Jake, Charles, Ethan and I can take care of it. Let us help," Ethan interjected. A brief silence followed before Nathaniel finally relented. "All right. A few hours," he murmured, his voice low and rough. "Thank you, Pookie Bear," Anna teased. Andrew stepped away from the hallway, pressing himself into a wall recess just as the study door opened. Dr. Hawthorne emerged, her arm linked with Nathaniel's, guiding him out. Alex, Ethan and Anna followed closely behind. Nathaniel and Aria made their way to the elevator while the others remained behind, watching. "We'll stay on top of things. If we need your input, we'll come to you," Ethan assured him as the two stepped inside. Nathaniel gave a silent nod. "Thank you, guys," Aria said just before the elevator doors closed. Once alone, she nestled into Nathaniel's side, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her face against his chest. Nathaniel exhaled, his focus shifting away from his turbulent thoughts, drawn instead to the warmth of her touch. "I'm sorry I didn't reach out to you when I lost my parents," he found himself saying. Aria lifted her gaze to meet his, searching his light grey eyes. "I wanted to," he admitted. "I won't lie. But you know me, I have too much pride." A teary smile curved Aria's lips, and Nathaniel returned it, lifting a hand to wipe the wetness from her cheeks with his thumb. Holding her gaze, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And I was scared. Scared to face the truth again, the truth that I wasn't able to make you love me." He managed to smile. "We're two blind fools, aren't we, my love?" Aria whispered back. Nathaniel let out a soft chuckle as he framed her face with his hands. The elevator had long since reached their floor, the doors standing open, but neither of them moved. "I was there at Silver Ridge, missing you, hoping you would come looking for me. To tell me our love was stronger than any misunderstanding, that you couldn't live without me." Aria's voice wavered as she continued. "I was scared too. When you never responded to the news of my pregnancy, I assumed you didn't care. I let my fears overshadow what I knew to be true about the man you are. I'm so sorry, my love. I should have been here. But I'm here now," she said, reaching up to cup one side of his jaw. "The only thing that would take me from you." Nathaniel silenced her with his hand, his dark eyes glistening with emotion. "Don't you dare," he whispered, his voice raw. "Don't you dare, Ariana. If you go, I go. Don't you freaking dare." Tears welled in Aria's eyes. Nathaniel felt the damp warmth of his own tears trailing down his face before he buried himself in the crook of her neck, pulling her into his arms. Aria clung to him, quietly crying. "I love you so much, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Now, forever and beyond, I am yours," she declared. "As I am yours, my Ariana," he responded. For a long moment, they held each other before Aria slowly pulled back. Wrapping her fingers around his wrist, she tugged him along. Nathaniel followed, pulling her close to his side as they made their way to the elevator. It carried them to the topmost floor, where they stepped into their bedroom. Once inside, Aria led him to the bathroom. She began undressing him, peeling away each layer with quiet intention before removing her own clothing. Then she guided him into the shower stall. Turning on the water, she let it cascade over them before lathering his body with soap. She urged him to sit on the tiled bench, working shampoo into his hair before using a bidet to rinse it out, watching as wet curls tumbled over his shoulders. She pulled him to his feet, scrubbing his body with careful attention before stepping under the spray to wash herself. When she turned her back to him, reaching to cleanse her skin, Nathaniel took the sponge from her hands. He scrubbed her back, pressing a lingering kiss to her shoulder once he was done. They rinsed off, and Arya stepped out first to retrieve a towel. When she returned, ready to dry him, their eyes met. Without a word, Nathaniel took the towel from her and began drying her body instead. Once finished, he lifted her into his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down gently. Arya opened her arms for him invitingly. He climbed in beside her, and she pulled the covers up over them, her naked form pressed intimately against his. They lay there, bodies entwined, as Arya gently stroked his hair, massaging his scalp. She felt his hold tighten around her. Leaning in, she kissed his forehead and whispered, "You can rest for a bit." Nathaniel nodded against her neck. "Thank you," he whispered back. Arya pulled away slightly to meet his gaze, nodding in acknowledgement before pressing a soft kiss to his lips. Then she drew him back into her embrace, holding him close. Jake carried the twins up the stairs to their room, just as the women were taking the triplets to theirs. As soon as they saw him, they exchanged glances, silently seeking answers, trying to process the sudden tragedy that had befallen the family. "Was she sick, Jake?" Miss Everly asked after he reassured her that Ian and Logan had been taken to the concierge medical unit. Jake's gaze flickered between Claire, Yen, Cassandra, and Juliet, 4 of the medical practitioners who had been on the plane that brought most of the staff back. "She had an underlying health condition," Cassandra responded, answering the older woman, "and the jet turbulence aggravated it. We found some medication in her purse disguised as simple pain relievers," Juliet added. "A few were beta blockers and nitrate tablets." Yen nodded. "It was obvious she didn't want anyone to know," she observed. "For her to know exactly what to take, she must have been diagnosed," Claire interjected. "She was likely managing a heart condition, maybe angina or heart failure. If she had nitrates, she could have been dealing with chronic chest pain. She probably didn't want to stop working, and knowing how seriously she took her job," she let her voice trail off. The women turned to Jake for confirmation. Pondering their words, he easily pieced together what must have happened. "Claire is right," Jake admitted. "Miss Jonas made a promise to the boss that she would be here for as long as possible. She probably didn't want him forcing her to stop working. Preparing his meals was a mission for her. Not doing it would have felt like breaking that promise." "And she would still be here if we hadn't been attacked," Evangeline said, frustration tightening her voice. Jake met her gaze and gave a solemn nod. "Poor Nate," Miss Bella murmured. Then turning to Jake, she added, "I'm so sorry for your loss." The other women echoed the sentiment. Jake nodded in acknowledgement. Owen and Liam, who had been quietly listening, pressed their faces against either side of their Uncle Jake's face in an attempt to comfort him. The group were about to step into the Hawthorne penthouse living room when Anita joined them, having been sent by Arya to help keep an eye on the children. After Jake set the twins down, Anita pulled him into a hug. "I'm so sorry, Jake. Please accept my condolences. Andrew, Charles, and Mr. Hill, they're devastated," she said in a hushed tone, mindful of the children, though they were already aware of what had happened. "Charles cried when he heard," Claire added solemnly. "It's just an unexpected blow," Anita murmured. Claire nodded in agreement. Jake, realizing that with Anita and the other women present, the boys would be well taken care of, gently ruffled Owen and Liam's hair and managed a small smile. As he turned to leave, Liam's small, uncertain voice stopped him. "Uncle Jake, will you come back?" Jake crouched slightly to meet Liam's eyes. "I promise you, Liam, nothing is going to happen to me." Liam nodded, though the concern in his eyes remained. Evangeline felt tears well behind her eyes as she held Jake's gaze. "Help me take care of the boys, please," he said. Evangeline nodded. "Of course," Anita replied. "Thank you, Jake." She drew Liam and Owen into a comforting hug just as Justin arrived with Tristan, who hurried over to join the twins. Miss Everly, Miss Bella, and Anita, with Evangeline's help, assisted the boys with bathing and changing out of their travel clothes, while Claire, Yen, Noria, Cassandra, Juliet, Isla, and Dawn did the same for the triplets. Once dressed, Liam, Owen, and Tristan went to sit beside the pool. The 3 played with the pet robot while someone from the kitchen brought them refreshments. Owen stared at the food, then turned to Liam with a furrowed brow. "Have you noticed we haven't seen Dad and Mom?" he asked. Dad must be really sad, right? Yeah, he was really sad, Tristan said, his face falling. Maybe we can do something to make him feel better, Liam suggested in a small voice. Like what? Tristan asked. I don't know, Liam frowned thoughtfully. Maybe we could give him Miss Jonas's picture. Mom used to hold Grandpa's picture sometimes when she missed him, remember, Owen? Owen nodded. Yeah, I remember, he confirmed. Where can we find her picture? Tristan asked, suddenly interested. We could check her room. Maybe we could find something of hers to give Dad so he can keep it and remember her by. That way he won't be so sad anymore, Liam said. Owen glanced toward the entrance of the living room and then at the elevator. A few of their aunts from their mum's clinic were gathered in the living room, but none of them seemed to be paying attention to the boys. Okay, let's eat first. Then we'll carry the tray downstairs ourselves, Owen said. Liam nodded, grinning. Do you know her room or apartment? Tristan asked in a hushed tone. Aunt Mary will help us, Liam answered with quiet confidence. Meanwhile, early on, just as Nathaniel re-entered the house with Dr. Hawthorne, Alex, Ethan and Anna following behind him, Tom climbed onto the porch. He ascended to the top landing, positioning himself where everyone could see him. I hate to stand before you all like this again, he began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. It's only been a few years since I had to bear the burden of telling you that we had lost Xavier Hawthorne and his wife Zoe Hawthorne. Then, just months later, we faced Nathaniel's cancer diagnosis, and now we have lost Miss Jonas. He paused, scanning the faces before him. But we are strong people. Whatever comes our way, good or bad, we always pull through. Miss Jonas was a pillar in this household, holding us together for decades through her culinary excellence. She was Zoe Hawthorne's favorite cook. Mary, he said, glancing toward the woman. Poor thing was always trying. A ripple of chuckles and quiet sobs passed through the crowd. We have to remember that Miss Jonas served us to the very end. And never forget what an incredible mother, sister, friend and aunt she was to us all. We are not going to grieve her, though it is understandable to miss her. We are going to celebrate her, because that is what she would have wanted. I know many of you wish Nathaniel would speak to you about this, but you all know how he was with Miss Jonas. When his parents died, she became his nurturer, his friend, his aunt, his mother. He is hurting, but we will remind him that Miss Jonas touched all our lives too, and we will celebrate her, not mourn her. When Tom finished, Mary, standing in the corner with the kitchen staff, wiped her eyes and spoke up. Thank you, Mr. Hill. One by one, others echoed her sentiment. Andrew, who had stepped outside after Nathaniel and Dr. Hawthorne went upstairs, returned to the porch with Alex, Anna and Ethan, catching the last half of Tom's speech. He nodded in approval. Let's make sure her absence doesn't create a lapse in our duties, Andrew announced. Let's do our jobs as usual. And it goes without saying, Mary, the kitchen is yours now. Mary nodded, her eyes swollen and red. She blew her nose before stepping back. The gathered household staff and estate workers slowly dispersed, though the Hawthorne guards remained, about 50 of them. Tom stayed as well, along with Ethan, Alex and Dr. Williams. I'll see where I can help, Anna whispered to Alex and Ethan. They nodded in acknowledgement, and she slipped inside the house. When do we move in on the people responsible for this, boss? One of the guards called out from the back. Thank you, Leif, Andrew replied. Before he could continue, Jake arrived, stepping up beside Ethan. I want you all to take note of these names, Andrew said, his voice firm. Leonard Whitaker, Francis Holloway, Joseph Aldridge, Gray, and Bastian Vale. We will track these men down along with their families. They are not to skip town. They are not to leave their homes. They are not to go anywhere. These men owe Hawthorne conglomerate a substantial amount of money, Jake added, his deep voice carrying across the open space. They were given until the end of the week to pay. Instead, they chose to eliminate the Hawthorne who stood in their way. They failed, except for one. And for that one life lost, and the attempt on the rest of our family, Charles interjected, they must pay. These men are permitted to go to only one place, Tom declared. The Devil's Mountain in 2 days' time. "We will provide the airlift to take them there," Tom stated. "None of them is to know when they are leaving or where they're being taken. All communications they have on them will be shut down. There will be a new dawn for Hawthorne Conglomerate, and they will be there to witness it." "What justice are we getting for Miss Jonas, though?" Lewis asked. "A tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye," Andrew declared. A deep, guttural growl rippled through the gathered men, followed by the pounding of fists against chests in a show of unwavering resolve. The resounding cheer carried an ominous weight, vibrating through the open air and into the house. Upstairs, from the children's room, Evangeline, Anita, Dawn, Juliet, Cassandra, Isla, Yen, Claire, Noria, Miss Bella, and Miss Everly stood behind the glass wall, watching in silence. Owen, Liam, and Tristan kept watch for the adults, ensuring no one was paying attention to them before they carried the food trays and headed for the elevator. As Tristan continuously glanced over his shoulder, Liam leaned in and whispered, "You have to act natural or they'll know we're up to something." Tristan shot him a sidelong glance, and Liam nodded firmly. The elevator doors slid open and they stepped inside, standing with their backs to the entrance as the doors closed. "That doesn't work on our mum, though," Owen remarked. "Yup, she's way smart," Liam said in exasperation. The three kept chatting until the elevator chimed and the doors opened on the 3rd floor. After taking another elevator ride, the doors slid open to the foyer. They hurried out and headed toward the kitchen. As they approached, they noticed one of their uncles stepping into the foyer from the kitchen and quickly greeted him. "Good afternoon, Uncle Gabriel," they called out, flashing smiles in an attempt to appear unsuspicious. Gabriel grinned. "Howdy, kids," he replied, waving as they passed by and entered the kitchen. Inside, Mary and the kitchen staff paused their tasks when they saw the boys carrying trays. 3 of the maids rushed forward to take the trays from them. Mary stepped out from behind the island counter, crouching slightly to meet them at eye level. "You could have called someone to come get the trays. You didn't have to bring them down yourselves," she said warmly. "But that was very sweet of you." Her eyes gleamed with affection. "Yes, we know, Auntie Mary," Owen replied. "But we heard about what happened to Miss Jonas, and we know everyone is sad, especially our dad. So we thought maybe you could help us get to her apartment. Or her room," Liam added. "So we can find a picture or something of hers to give to Dad," Owen finished, and the other 2 nodded in agreement. "Oh," one of the staff members cooed, covering her face as she wiped away tears. Owen noticed that Aunt Mary looked on the verge of crying too, and he suddenly felt guilty for making her sad. "We're sorry, Aunt Mary," he said softly. "We can get you a picture of Miss Jonas too," Tristan added. Mary chuckled, even as her eyes welled with tears. "Thinking of helping your dad feel better by getting him a keepsake from Miss Jonas's room is actually a wonderful idea. I'm sure Miss Jonas would be so happy to know you're looking out for him," she said. "And your request didn't make me sad. I'm just touched that you thought of it. Thank you." The boys nodded in acknowledgement. "All right, come on. I'll take you to Miss Jonas's room here in the building," one of the kitchen staff, Aunt Tina, offered as she approached them. "Go on with Aunt Tina while I finish preparing lunch for the house," Aunt Mary said. "Okay, thank you, Aunt Mary," the 3 chorused before hurrying over to Aunt Tina, who held out her hands for them. Liam took her left hand, while Owen walked beside her with one hand casually tucked into his pocket, intentionally ensuring that Aunt Tina would take Tristan's hand instead. When Tristan reached for her other hand, Owen smirked subtly, satisfied that his plan had worked. Aunt Tina led them through the back exit of the foyer and down a corridor that ended at a solid wooden door. She opened it and pushed it inward, revealing a dimly lit yet elegantly furnished room that was meticulously maintained. One entire wall was made of glass, offering a view of a stunning rose garden filled with red, white, and yellow roses. A fountain stood at the center, with a stone bench positioned beside the water. The soft glow from the garden lights filtered into the room, casting a warm illumination over the space. Drawn to the serene beauty of the scene, the boys crossed the room to stand by the glass wall for a bit, then they turned around to take in the room. Owen silently noted how the furniture was well arranged, with a chest of drawers stationed at the foot of the bed. To the right, near the glass wall, was a reclining chair with a blanket neatly folded and placed over it. Beside the chair stood a bookshelf filled with books, one of which rested on a small stool nearby. To the left of the room was the bed, and above its headboard, a recessed wall housed a collection of decorative ornaments and framed photographs. Among them was a picture of Nathaniel Hawthorne as a toddler, cradled in Miss Jonas's arms. Another frame held a youthful image of Miss Jonas on her wedding day. Then there was a photograph of a toddler standing in a crib, flanked by scented candles. Liam eyed the bed, tempted to climb onto it, but hesitated. It was so perfectly arranged that he didn't want to disturb it. Noticing his reluctance, Aunt Tina reassured him. "Go on, don't worry. We'll straighten everything out before we leave." Even with her encouragement, Liam hesitated for a moment before carefully climbing onto the bed. He reached for the framed picture of his father. He knew it had to be his dad because the boy in the photograph looked just like him and Owen when they were little. However, something about the picture seemed different. The resolution wasn't quite the same as the baby pictures they had seen of themselves. "This should be okay," Liam said, then turned to call for Owen. Owen, who had picked up the book resting beside the reclining chair, suddenly noticed a folded piece of paper slip from between its pages. He picked it up just as Liam called his name, momentarily shifting his attention. Before he could respond, the paper slipped from his grasp and fell to the floor. Tristan bent down, retrieved it, and handed it back to Owen. "I don't think we should," Aunt Tina started, hesitant to let the children read what could be a private letter. "It's addressed to my dad," Owen said, his brows knitting together as he examined the paper. Tina halted mid-step. "Oh," she murmured. "She must have written my dad a letter, knowing she might not make it," Owen said, his voice quiet but certain. "That does seem logical," Aunt Tina admitted. "We'll take this to him, along with the framed picture, if that's okay," Owen stated firmly. Tina nodded slowly. "Yes, of course," she said. "Who is this, Aunt Tina?" Liam asked, pointing to the framed picture of a toddler with 2 scented candles placed on either side of it. Owen pocketed the folded paper addressed to his dad and joined Liam. Tristan followed suit, mimicking his actions. "I'm not sure, Liam. Miss Jonas didn't really talk much about her family, but I do know her husband died in the war, and I suspect your Uncle Andrew knew him," Tina explained. "Oh, that's sad," Tristan said softly. "Yeah," Owen agreed, while Liam nodded with a solemn expression. Owen reached for the picture of the toddler. "Owen, we shouldn't—" Tina began. "I'll put it back," Owen assured her as he turned the frame over. He noticed a note tucked behind it, carefully removed it, and unfolded the paper. "What does it say?" Liam asked, his curiosity piqued. "It's, a death certificate," Owen said, his expression falling. Tina's brows furrowed as she stepped closer to the bed. She glanced at the paper and confirmed that it was indeed a death certificate for a Matthew Jonas, who had died at 6 years old. The listed cause of death was sickle cell disease. A wave of emotion tightened Tina's chest. Tears welled in her eyes as she quietly turned her back to the children, absorbing the weight of the discovery. The loss Miss Jonas had endured in her lifetime was unimaginable. First her husband, then her child. No wonder she and the boss had formed such a strong bond. Tina let out a quiet sob, wiping her tears discreetly. "It's really sad. Her husband died, and then her child too," Tristan murmured. "Yeah," Owen agreed, his voice subdued. "We'll give Dad the pictures," Liam said decisively. "All of them?" Tristan asked. "Yes, all of them," Owen replied. "Big Mama once told us about a cat she had. When she buried the cat, she buried all its toys with it. Maybe Dad can have these pictures buried with Miss Jonas and just keep this one," he said, pointing to the framed picture Liam had been holding. "Or he could place it on her grave," Liam suggested. Owen nodded. "Yeah, he could do that too. That sounds better. Otherwise, they'll just end up stored away in the attic," Tristan added. Tina couldn't help but smile as she listened to the boys thoughtfully discuss what to do with Miss Jonas's keepsakes. They genuinely cared. She wiped the last of her tears and turned back to them. "Now that we've got what we came for, let's straighten up before we go," she said. The boys nodded and climbed off the bed. A short while later, they were hurrying back to the elevator, their hands full of framed photographs. Upstairs, just moments earlier, Nathaniel lay in bed with Ariana, his body enveloping hers as he held her close, his face nestled in the curve of her neck. Though the thought of speaking with Andrew to fully understand what had happened in the plane attack gnawed at him, he allowed Aria to pull him into her world, keeping him from sinking into despair as he had when he lost his parents. The warmth of her body anchored him, grounding him in the present, even as reality lingered at the back of his mind, pressing against his consciousness. Being with her made everything feel a little more bearable. Every time anger surged within him at the thought of Gray and his accomplices, Aria's soft voice whispered soothing words, and her subtle movements against him forced his focus back to her. He pressed a kiss to the back of her shoulder and felt her shiver. He did it again and again, drawing a soft moan from her lips. Repositioning his arms, he reached up to her chest and filled his palms with her soft fullness, his fingers gliding along her skin as she craned her neck to look back at him, her gaze heavy with affection. Nathaniel kissed her, his lips teasing and nibbling at the soft flesh of her mouth. He parted her lips, his tongue slipping between them to explore, stroking hers in slow, deliberate movements. He traced the inside of her mouth, gliding along the edge of her lips before capturing them again, suckling gently. When he paused to catch his breath, Aria began moving lower, pressing lingering kisses along his throat. Her lips traced over his Adam's apple, pausing at the scar she had made when she cut into his throat to save him from choking on his own blood. She continued downward, her skin brushing against his, her soft, wet lips mapping the contours of his chest, the defined ridges of his pectorals, the taut muscles of his abdomen, and lower still to his flat stomach. Then, slowly, she moved back up, tracing her tongue over the incision mark on his chest, the scar left from his heart surgery. A guttural groan escaped Nathaniel as his hands fisted the sheets, his body tensing beneath her touch. He wanted to take control, to pull her to him and reclaim his dominance, but Aria kept him in place, drawing out his restraint. His nails dug into the bedding as he arched his neck, struggling to remain still. "Ariana," he murmured, his voice thick and husky. Ignoring his unspoken plea, she continued her descent, her lips teasing along the defined lines of his pelvis. Nathaniel's breath hitched. "Why am I being tortured right now?" he barely managed to say before she took him in her mouth, sending a jolt of pleasure coursing through him. A deep, rough moan rumbled from his throat as his grip on the covers tightened. "You're killing me," he whispered, his voice strained with pleasure. When she finally straddled him, sinking down onto him, his restraint snapped. He shot upright, his stormy grey eyes locking onto hers. Aria's lips parted in a breathy moan, her expression awash with pleasure. She took in the sight of him, his broad chest rising and falling with heavy breaths, his wavy curls framing his strong features, his red lips swollen from their kisses. The intensity of his gaze sent another wave of heat coursing through her. Nathaniel cupped her throat with one hand, his other gripping her thigh as he rose to his knees. In one fluid motion, he flipped her onto her back, looming over her. Aria gasped as he drove into her, a deep groan tearing from his throat. His eyes darkened with raw emotion, the intensity of what she stirred in him evident in every movement. "Ariana," he whispered, his voice rough with need. "Nathan," she breathed, soft and low. Lifting her, he settled her onto his lap, never pausing, his grip firm as he guided her movements. Aria's breath came in gasps, her lashes fluttering as pleasure overwhelmed her. Nathaniel held nothing back, his body claiming hers as though he were imprinting himself on her, as though he needed to remind them both that she was his. When his lips latched onto her skin, heat surged through her and she trembled in his arms. Nathaniel wrapped himself around her, burying his face in the crook of her neck as he chased his release. Aria melted against him, boneless in his hold, her body thoroughly spent. "My Ariana," he murmured, his voice raw as he surrendered to the moment, his embrace tightening around her. A soft knock at the door came a while later, followed by the boys calling for their dad. Aria sat up, cupped Nathaniel's jaw and kissed him. "Baby," she whispered. Nathaniel murmured, his eyes fluttering open. "The boys are at the door," she said. He sat up immediately, left the bed and headed to the walk-in closet to put on some clothes. Arya did the same while Nathaniel went to answer the door. When he opened it, he frowned slightly at the sight of the boys holding framed pictures. "What do you have there, kids?" he asked, his voice husky and low. "We brought you keepsakes from Miss Jonas's room," Liam said. "We thought it might help so you wouldn't feel so sad," Owen added. "And we found things we can bury with her," Tristan chimed in. Nathaniel felt his chest tighten at their words, emotions welling up inside him. Despite the ache, he smiled and took the frame Liam was holding. He gestured for them to come inside, shut the door, and walked over to the sitting area. Lowering himself onto the couch, he gazed at the old picture frame in his hands. "Thank you, boys. I really appreciate this," he said, his voice low and rough with emotion. "We can put it on the fireplace," Liam suggested. Without waiting for a response, he took the frame and hurried toward the mantel. Tristan helped him drag a stool closer, and Liam climbed up to place the framed picture beside the ones of their grandparents. "What do you think, Daddy?" he called over his shoulder. "It's perfect. Thank you, son," Nathaniel said. Owen handed him the other pictures they had gathered to bury with Miss Jonas. Nathaniel let out a quiet breath and said, "I think I'd rather place them on her tombstone instead." "That's fine too," Owen said with a nod. Then he pulled out a folded piece of paper and extended it to his father. "We also found this. It's addressed to you," Owen said. "We think she wrote it before she passed," Tristan added. Nathaniel accepted the letter with a solemn nod. The boys waited for him to open it, but when he didn't right away, Liam took it back, unfolded it, and climbed onto his father's lap, leaning against his chest as he began reading the letter aloud. "Dearest boss, I'm sorry. Please don't fire anyone. It would break my heart if someone lost their job because of my determination and stubbornness. I didn't want to spend the rest of my days being waited on. I felt that would take me faster than my failing heart ever could. I made sure not to seek treatment at Williman's hospital because I knew you'd have the report before I even blinked, and I knew you'd forbid me from the kitchen. But working was the only way I knew to keep the ghosts away. You and I both understand the ghosts that linger in the silence when everything is still." Liam paused, furrowing his brow as he looked up at his father. "She doesn't mean actual ghosts, son," Nathaniel said in a soft, warm voice. "Phew," Liam sighed before continuing to read. "If I had to go, I wanted it to be on my feet until the very end, bringing smiles to your face and nurturing you and the beautiful family you've built. Oh, how proud your mother would have been to see the man you've become. And Mr. Xavier, he wouldn't have let the world hear the end of it. They were always proud of your intellectual achievements, and I know they're up there watching, smiling and beaming with pride. The woman you chose to love, the beautiful grandchildren you've given them. You've extended their legacy one generation more. And I am proud as well. Forgive me, but these old bones need to rest now. It's time for me to join Matthew and his pa. However, I leave in peace, knowing you have your guardians. Mr. Hill, Andrew, Charles, Jake, and Dr. Hawthorne. I know they will take care of you, I am sure of it. Good night, boss. With love, Miss Henrietta Jonas." Nathaniel took a deep breath and released it slowly. He was grateful for the boys. He was certain that if they weren't there, he would be bawling his eyes out. Liam looked up at him and handed back the folded letter. As Nathaniel took it, Liam asked, "Are you sure she wasn't talking about real ghosts, Daddy?" His small eyes narrowed with intent. Nathaniel let out a chuckle. He truly felt blessed to have his children. "Yes, Liam, I'm sure," he assured him. "All right, if you say so," Liam said. He climbed down from his father's lap and onto the chair Nathaniel was sitting on so he could reach him better. Then he wrapped his small arms around his father's neck and said, "Sorry, Dad, we'll miss her too." Owen joined in, and after a brief hesitation, Tristan did as well. The three boys hugged Nathaniel tightly. Arya, leaning against the doorframe of the walk-in closet, wiped away her tears as she watched the moment unfold. Meanwhile, at his family home in Tuxedo Park, an hour north of New York City, not his townhouse on Fifth Avenue, Gray sat in his study, conducting an online meeting with his executive staff. He was in the middle of instructing them to maintain peak performance while he was on vacation when his phone suddenly went dead. A frown creased his brow as he glanced down at the device, noting the signal had dropped to a single bar. Letting out a slow, uneasy breath, he tapped the screen, but nothing changed. When his eyes landed on the time, he left his study to get ready. About 2 hours later, fully dressed and prepared to leave, he picked up his phone again, slightly perplexed as to why none of his staff had called him back. That's when he noticed the signal was completely gone. Before he could dwell on it, his butler called from the doorway. "Sir, the car is ready." Gray exhaled sharply and headed out. "Tell Evan to meet me at the airport in Houston." "Yes, sir," the elderly man replied with a bow of his head. Gray strode out of the study, his mind shifting back to the dead signal. As he stepped through the grand hall, his household staff, directed by his housekeeper, hurried past, loading his luggage into the black Jeep waiting outside on the porch. "I'll call you when I land, and remind Elizabeth to stick to the plan. No deviations," he said to his housekeeper. "Of course, sir," the older woman promptly replied. Satisfied, Gray slid into the back seat. The driver quickly moved to his position, and his butler stepped forward to shut the door. As the vehicle rolled down the long, tree-lined driveway, Gray leaned back, trying to open an email on his tablet, and noticed that there was no connection on his tablet either. His brows furrowed in bemusement. The driver approached the front gate, expecting it to open automatically, but it didn't. Frowning, he brought the car to a halt, waiting for security to respond and open it manually. Seconds passed. Nothing happened. Gray, engrossed in his tablet, barely noticed at first. But when the car remained stationary for longer than usual, irritation flickered across his face. He looked up. His frown deepened. "What's the hold-up?" he demanded. "I don't know, sir. I'll check," the driver said, unbuckling his seatbelt before stepping out. As Gray watched from inside, he noticed something off. Outside the gate, a luxury black bus had pulled up. He frowned, eyes narrowing. His confusion deepened when the doors of the bus hissed open, and his wife and children, 2 daughters and a son, were ushered out by masked men. Gray's entire body tensed. His driver hesitated upon seeing the masked men, glancing around for the armed security guards who were usually stationed at the gate. But they were nowhere in sight. The 4 masked men escorted Gray's family to the pedestrian entrance, unlocked it, and shoved them inside. Then, without a word, they padlocked the gate from the outside, turned, and disappeared back across the field toward the waiting bus. Gray's stomach dropped. "What the—" He shoved open the car door and stepped out, his pulse hammering in his ears. His wife and children ran toward him, panic written all over their faces. "Gray, what's happening?" Elizabeth, his wife, probed. He shook his head, confused. "They pulled us out of school," his son said, breathless. "Heavily armed, they grabbed us and took us to your office," he managed to say. "We saw them throwing out your staff and locking the building," his daughter added, her voice quivering. "Dad, what's going on?" Gray felt his blood run cold. His head swam. His throat tightened. "Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit," he started to mutter under his breath. "Gray!" Elizabeth grabbed his arm, shaking him. "Talk to me! What is happening?" Gray turned toward the gate, his heart slamming against his ribs as he strode towards it. Then a figure emerged from the shadows behind the iron bars. One of the masked men. The man extended a gloved hand, holding out an envelope. Gray swallowed hard. His fingers trembled as he took it. The moment the letter left the man's hand, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the tree line without another word. Gray stood there, staring at the letter. He figured he already knew who it was from, but when he unfolded it, the name at the bottom made his stomach plummet. It was Andrew McLeod. A suffocating sense of dread crawled up his spine as he scanned the contents. The Hawthornes had decided to collect their debt. Effective immediately, all of his assets, his office buildings, his home, his accounts, had been seized by the Hawthorne conglomerate's debt recovery division, the ones overseeing the enforcement. Tom Hill and Andrew McLeod. The letter even included a copy of his contract, highlighting the clause that granted them the authority to repossess everything he owned as they saw fit. His vision blurred, his breath hitched, his knees nearly gave out. He gripped the letter so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Gray?" Elizabeth's voice wavered. "What does it say?" "Dad?" his daughter whispered. Gray couldn't hear them. All he could hear was the pounding of his own heartbeat. The only logical explanation was that either Nathaniel Hawthorne was dead and Andrew had found out Gray was behind it, or the bastard was alive. And if Nathaniel was alive, Gray lifted his head slowly, turning toward his family. His wife's face was pale. His children looked terrified. His entire life had just been torn out from under him. His throat tightened. His lips felt numb. He couldn't even form the words. Finally, he exhaled shakily and whispered, "I am so sorry." Earlier, Andrew divided 50 of his men into 5